on the record.
Okay, we are on air. Welcome. This is the Jordan School District Board of Education meeting. Today is Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. We are here in the JATC South building, and we have 5 board members present. And we'd like to excuse Daryl Robinson. He is coming, but will be a little late. And also, I've not heard from Mr. Dunford, but assuming that he's also on his way. So we have a full agenda tonight and several closed session items also. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. Oh, I do also want to recognize that we have a legislator here with us just visiting tonight. That Representative Pulsifer, welcome. Glad to have you here also. Okay, we're going to start out with a presentation on where we're at with Portrait of a Graduate and the strategic plan process. It has been a very busy couple of weeks for that, but we're excited to share the results with you for that. I just want to give just a personal recognition to start out with to Carolyn Goff. She really has shouldered a heavy load, and doing this right at the beginning of the school year when we have so much else going on made it a really busy time. But we appreciate you, Ms. Goff, and all that you've done for this. So I will turn the time over to Ms. George to give the presentation. And it's on board docs, and we've also got it up for you.
And Ms. Goff, if you want to join us at the mic, I'm sure your answers will be far better than any I can provide. So can we go on to the next slide? So this has been an incredibly busy time. So this is that timeline that you've seen before, and you can see kind of where we are in the green area. So we have been really involved in community engagement activities. We've had our survey out, and then we've also been, Education Elements has been hosting our focus groups actively. And so this will all sort of culminate on the 21st engagement review and visioning. So that's when our focus, or when our steering team will come together and really dive into this data. But before that, we should talk about our steering team. So if you can progress it again. So we were able to meet together for the first time, and really, can you skip to the next one? With our steering team a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember what day
August
it was.
30th.
August 30th. Look at you with all your facts.
It's right here.
Oh, it's on there. Look at that. So this is a group of people that each of you had a hand in helping to select and invite. They are people who are pretty committed to a good chunk of time. They're going to be the representative body that kicks off the process and advises it through it. They'll provide insight into current district context, and you'll even see a little bit of their insights from the first one through the course of this slideshow. They'll review trends from community engagement and then help to draft their strategic plan and Portrait of a Graduate. So, can you go to the next slide, please? So, what story do you hope your plan tells about the Jordan School District? So this is kind of the point that we're getting to, where there's so much that we can say and do and proceed with. And so that question was asked to our group. And the next slide was just a Padlet that had several of the answers from members of the team. And what I love about this is that they're different, but they're cohesive in, a pretty good idea of what we want. I was surprised. We had breakout rooms during our meeting. It was on a Zoom meeting on the 30th. And during the meeting, we would break out and then we would come back together and talk. And I was interested to see how often the same themes were brought up again and again, and that we seem to be on the same page. So it's
May I
nice.
ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Are the colors, do they mean a specific group, or are they just for aesthetics?
Just aesthetics. People
Thank
got
you.
to choose their own colors. So I don't want to go too fast. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at a few of those comments. Okay, So then we have engaging our community, which is what I talked about with the survey. So first of all, our community engagement. So far we have over 20,000 responses to the survey, which we're so excited about. It's doubling every time I talk to them. So that's really exciting. Our secondary students have been taking this survey at schools, so that has definitely helped bolster things, but we've had so many responses from other groups as well. We've had 229 people participate in focus groups, and then that was broken up into 27 different focus groups. So yeah, it's really exciting. So then,
So is there overlap in the focus groups, or about how many people are in focus groups? How many people are in each focus group? Or
yeah. So they tried to keep them no more than 13, but it just depended on the session, what times worked best for people and when they were able to make it. So some were lighter than that, others more. Like we had a session that was all for elected officials, as you can imagine, not as well attended because of busy schedules, but I think they've done really well at filling all of those sessions. So.
And the focus groups were specific, like parents were in one, teachers were in one, employees, community members without kids were in one. So they kind of had them broken out for
Okay.
different groups.
okay, because I was just looking. So I was just doing math and looking at it. So there's like fewer than 10 average in each focus group. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I mean, some have
on
more, some
average.
have
Mhm.
less. Okay.
But yeah, we've students. You can see kind of the types of people that were able to attend in those focus groups. So some of the questions that were asked, each of the board members had an opportunity to review questions and provide input on those. So these are those same questions. It was really exciting to us to see some of the results. So the yellows are strongly agree and agree areas. And then, well, I shouldn't say all the yellows, but the ones to the right. And then we've got our neutral in the gray, and then the yellows on the left are strongly disagree or disagree. And so this is really the kind of data that our steering team will now dive into, looking for trends and trying to find exactly what these answers mean to us. So I don't know how in depth we want to go on each of these. Do you want specifics on all of them?
I don't think so. I think people can look them over.
Okay, that's kind of what I was planning on doing, but yeah, feel free at your leisure to look through these. It's really, it's been helpful to be able to see people's responses, and a little bit encouraging to me as I've looked through them. Okay.
Okay, this was
Question.
a lot encouraging to me. I thought the results were so good. And education elements even mentioned that they really have not seen results this good with other districts. So I was very encouraged by it.
On each question, it says at the end, n equals, and then some number. Is that the number of responses to that question? Is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay. If the third question down only has 3,400 responses compared to 17,000, 16,000, were there some questions that were only asked to certain groups of people? Okay.
Exactly. Yep. So in that case, we're looking at probably parents only in
Yeah.
that question. Great note. Okay. So with that, like I mentioned, on the 21st, we have our first all-day meeting with the steering team where we'll divide out into sections of this data and really jump in. So any questions that you guys have?
I mentioned to Tracy yesterday that I would be interested in seeing answers to these questions broken out by the groups rather than just all lumped together. I think that would be interesting to see how students responded, how parents responded, how teachers responded.
And
And-
they're able to give us some of those demographics. Well, so they could, I'm sure that would be an easier question to have answered, but they also offered on questions of particular interest to us that they can go in and break out the kinds of responses they receive from different groups to see if there are trends. And so we did ask for that on a couple of these.
And that will be the work of the steering committee, as they will do deep dives into what all these and disaggregate them, and Education Elements will start out by disaggregating and bringing us, you know, some of the things that stand out to them from their perspective. Ms. Goff, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think you've hit all of the things that, and to Brian's point too, yeah, all of that can be disaggregated, and when they're done with the steering team, we get the lump data too. So if we want to play with it even further, we can do that.
Perfect. Well, I would just echo a huge thank you to Ms. Goff and to those who were willing to join us on our steering team. Like I mentioned, it's not a small commitment that they've made. Took about half of my days off this year to be a part of it. So it's not a small thing that they're doing for a district, but it was incredibly exciting to me to feel the representation in the groups, to be able to see the different groups of people there and the way that their perspectives enrich the conversation. So I'm really looking forward to working with them, and just a huge shout out to Education Elements. They have been fantastic. They put all of these slides together for us. It seems like everything we ask for, they've just really gone above and beyond what I could have hoped. So really looking forward to this process, and I think it's going to be incredibly valuable for our district.
Can you remind us of the makeup of the steering team?
Yeah.
I can.
Carolyn can.
So there are about 20 people that make up that steering team, and they are coming from the community, from all levels of schools. So as far as like teachers, they represent all three levels. There are administrators representing all three levels. There are classified staff representing various parts of the district. And then there are community members that have no children in the district. And then there are two students, one who is a former graduate of our district and one who is a current senior. And there are about 2 or 3 district office administrators. Mhm.
Anything else to add, anyone? All right.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, Dr. Godfrey, did you have anything else to add?
I would just echo what's been said. Carolyn Goff has done a tremendous amount of work to move this forward, and I really appreciate everything she's personally done to be sure that people are contacted and everything's organized. And Education Elements has done a great job as well to help facilitate these focus groups that I think couldn't happen any other way, because the folks that are talking with them aren't talking with people from the district, and they're able to be very candid in those discussions. So it's the process has gone really well, and the 2 board members working on this, Tracy and Nikki, have done a great job of making themselves available for all those meetings, as Nikki pointed out, and have really helped guide this as well. So everyone's just pitching in and working hard, and we're getting some great information from that, and I'm eager to have more information to share in the future, which I know we will. So.
Thank you, and I really have appreciated being able to watch the process you know, because we've got a group that's not part of the district that's kind of standing back and looking in, and works with districts all across the country. That's been really, you know, interesting to see what their perspectives are, and then that so many people from the community are involved in this process. It's not just what the board thinks. It's not just what our cabinet thinks. This is a full community process. So I'm excited to see where it goes next. Thank you. All right, our next agenda item is a review of proposed Title III policy. Dr. Anderson.
Yeah, President Miller, Ms. Loveday has been detained and is en route. I wonder if we could maybe flip-flop the next couple of agenda items.
Yes, I am fine with that. Ms. Robinson, are you okay with that? Okay. Let's go on to agenda item C, special education proposed revisions to policies and procedures manual. And we'll welcome Ms. Robinson, who's our administrator of schools, and Ms. Lloyd, our director of special education, to the table. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you for giving us just a few minutes today. You know, there's not much in special education that doesn't have a long list of rules and policies and procedures about it. And so we appreciate the time we have today to sit down and just share a little bit of information about, thank you, about the changes that the state has made in their policy and procedure manual. So just kind of to give you some quick background, if there are any changes or adjustments to federal rules or policies, those trickle down to the state level. If the state has any changes related to policies and procedures, that trickles down to the... Sorry, a little technical difficulty there. This is also just a copy of the slide that we posted on your board docs, if you wanted to take a look there. And so the state made changes to the special education policy and procedure manual, which I'll let Kim talk to you about a little bit, and then basically gave the option to the district to say, choose this manual, this manual, or this manual that matches the procedures that you follow in your district. And we already brought some changes to you a couple of years ago when we changed the process for identifying students with learning disabilities. And so that decision has already been made. So we just are here to make updates to the policy manual only that are associated with the state changes. So nothing changes in our individual district policies and procedures. It's just how we apply the state and federal policy and procedures to our programs. So they also have asked that be not only updated and submitted to the state for their approval, but then once that has been received, that we bring it to our board and then have it approved at the board level. And so that's what we are seeking here today is just initial information that we're providing for you. So in your board docs, you'll have a copy of the whole draft policy and procedure manual, and then Kim will just briefly touch on some updates that are outlined in there. So I'll turn the time over to her.
Thank you. Like Lisa said, these are all policy changes that USBE made, and then they've been approved by the state board, which then means we have to adjust ours. So all I put in here is the basic major components that teachers are going to want to pay attention to that we're putting out for teachers. And that is, there's just some definitions that are there, but then underneath them, it's the defined pieces of that. So developmental delay is one of our classifications of eligibility. That used to be that you had to change, the DD only went from 3 to 7, and meaning that they could be throughout 7, but by 8 they had to change the classification, and they've changed that to where they now can be 3 to 8, but they have to change the classification prior to turning 9. I believe that follows more of the federal policy or the federal law, not policy, but IDEA. They changed the title from emotional disturbed to emotional behavioral disturbance, or disability, emotional behavioral disability. They added some language in the IEP concerning how to create an amendment to an IEP and when we can do that. versus not meeting a full team, meaning that if you make 30 minutes more of changes in services, then it's required to have a full IEP team present. If we're making minor changes like accommodations or smaller modifications or something that doesn't affect the minutes of the IEP, then that can be done between a very small group, like the teacher and the parent, or the school psych and the teacher and the parent, but it doesn't require all of the members in that. The other thing that's changed is some of the post-secondary language and then post-secondary goals for our kiddos that are in our 19 to 21 age range. And then they've included, so what we've done when our students with disabilities are suspended, the half day has always been a question. So the half day is counted within now as a full day, basically. So that's the added language there. And then there's some expedited due process time in hearings, but that's defined within the procedural safeguards. So those are the major components. There's lots of small ones, but those are the major ones. Do you have questions or concerns? So basically, we just need that for you guys to, for it to be placed on the next agenda and have it approved if that's something you feel works.
So the 114-page procedure manual is something that we've had already, and we're just updating the changes from the state.
That's it. So it really is, when Lisa talked about what we do, it's for SLD, we're a combination district. So we combine RTI data with formal testing data. So we take that copy and then we just put in all of the state's pieces to that. And that's what we have at this moment. So none of our procedures have changed. Nothing we do has changed. Just what we call ED to EBD and timelines for our developmentally delayed and some other minor pieces. But everything else stays the same. Like Jordan School District isn't changing any procedures at all. I know. I thought if you don't have any questions, I would like to take just a moment and say thank you to the board for the special education salary for our paraprofessionals, for our classified folks. That's really made a difference for our teachers, for our schools, in that it's been able to allow us to retain some people that were thinking about leaving. They've let us know that they appreciated that. We've been able to recruit quite a bit. We hire on a daily basis. We're very quickly, more than we have before, been able to fill more and more positions at a quicker rate. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for that. We appreciate that. Our teachers appreciate that, and our schools and students appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions about this? Are you okay voting on it at our next business meeting? Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will go on to item D, dual language immersion rules. And we'll invite Ms. Goff and Ms. Rizzuto to the table. And Dr. Godfrey, would you like to start off?
Yes, I appreciate their being here. We've had discussions in cabinet about procedures for dual language immersion going forward and trying to bring some balance to class sizes and maybe reflect the process that's used in some other districts in the way that we operate. I don't know that these have been updated since we started dual language immersion many years ago. So I think it's a good time to talk this through, and because the board will probably just, you hear about dual language immersion, and it's an important program in our district that's been going on for a long time. So when we're going to make changes, that's just something we want to bring to you for discussion. So I don't know that well, I'll let them go ahead and get started on it, but I think it'll just be a good discussion to get some information about what the program looks like currently and what the proposed changes are.
Yeah, thanks. And Kay will be the one to give this presentation, but I did want to add that 9 years ago I was in teaching and learning before, and this was my job. So it was kind of interesting to see the development over time of this particular program, and it's exciting and the changes. But to the superintendent's point, there are some things that have not been updated and have not been changed in all that time. And so this is a proposal that we're bringing to you of some things that I think would benefit our dual immersion programs, especially as it pertains to letting students into these programs. So I'll turn the time to Kay, and she can describe that as she goes through these few slides.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. So in Jordan School District, we currently have 10 elementary schools, 9 middle schools, and 5 high schools that have the DLI program, and 7 of the 10 first grade programs are full right now. 3 of our Chinese programs still have some space. And this is good news because last year we did a big recruitment process and we were able to fill most of those programs. Because the district is so large, we have a lot of variation in enrollment. And that can cause some problems with our DLI program if we don't think about the school needs and what we need to do to keep the DLI program sustainable. So currently, these are our guidelines for first grade placement. First, we accept the siblings of current DLI students, and then we'll accept the boundary students, then the out of boundary, but also in the district, and then out of district, and then we'll do a lottery if needed. The lottery can be done at any of those steps. So say we had 10 siblings and then 90 boundary students apply, we would do a lottery with the boundary students to get to the number that we desire, which is 56 students. So we have 2 DLI first grade classes with 28 in each class. And to function best, it's to have the 2 DLI classes and at least 2 regular non-DLI classes for first grade. But because the enrollment is what it is, we have certain areas that the boundaries are shrinking, or the enrollment is shrinking in some of the boundaries. And so Harriman Elementary is a perfect example. They currently have 67 students in kindergarten. So when it comes time to apply for DLI in a few months, they'll need 56 students to fill the 2 DLI classes. They will start by taking the siblings, and then if they take the boundary students, that has the potential to leave only 11 students in the regular first grade class, which makes it very difficult for the whole team and for the school. So we are proposing that we allow for some school flexibility because of the differences around the district. Some of the schools don't have that problem, so they don't need to have the same guidelines that Harriman Elementary would have. And so we just want to make it based off of the school needs rather than just a one-size-fits-all for all of the schools. So what would that look like? Other districts have, this is what the neighboring districts are doing. You can see that Granite and Canyons already do it based on the needs of the schools. And then Alpine and Tooele have a different setup at this point.
What does that mean exactly, the needs of the school? What do you look at?
So they'll look at some potential changes, like they might take, like Alpine does, a certain percentage of boundary students and a certain percentage of out-of-boundary students. They might even not have the sibling preference. They might just do a lottery for everybody. They might take heritage language speakers. It just depends upon what the needs of that school is.
Ever give or take on the number?
I think that would be based off of the school and
Yeah.
what they would need to communicate. Yep.
So like in Alpine's example where they say 50% boundary students, if there's more than 50% boundary students that want the program,
Then they would do a lottery.
They do a lottery because they're only going to let 50% boundary in. Okay.
Which I love. So, what could that look like? Here is a potential option. So, Portuguese have at Bluffdale Elementary, and this could be something that they could do. It just so happens that in the past few years, we've had a handful of Brazilian families that have moved into the district, and they would love to be part of this program, but they haven't been able to get accepted because they're not in the boundaries of Bluffdale Elementary. So a potential option could be that they would have siblings first and then do the heritage language speakers, from Brazil, which isn't going to be a lot. It would be maybe 2 to 5 students in a school year. And then have a lottery to fill the rest of the slots with the boundary students. So that's one potential option. Another potential option could be, this could fit with Harriman Elementary, that they start with the siblings and then they set a certain percentage of out-of-boundary students that they accept. Spanish is a really popular language and people are trying to get in it all around the district, so they could have a percentage that they determine, and then they have a lottery to fill the remaining slots. That would make it so that they could be more sustainable for their entire school and have both a full DLI program and a full regular first grade. We want to also make sure that they are working with their school community council. That would be very important. They just can't decide as the principal, well, this is what I think is the need. They need to work with their school community council. The communities are the ones who started the programs. And so working with them is super important. A perfect example of this was with our French program at Fox Hollow this past year. Their numbers were very low and they weren't getting very many applications. And so the community, they did outreach and they were able to get enough people to sign up that they even have a waiting list right now to get into the current first grade. The communities want these programs to survive, to thrive and to be successful, and so getting the school community council involved is important. They also will need to be transparent and let the communities know what they're going to do, so that it's not a question of how it's going to proceed, and then that working together will help them to determine what will work best so that they can have full DLI classes and full regular classes. What questions do you have?
Just want to reemphasize something that Kay said, and that is, and to your questions that you asked earlier, this could mean that every school, like she showed in those examples, could have a slightly different way of accepting students, right? So Portuguese at Bluffdale would look different than Harriman, which would look different than a Chinese program. It would just simply be based on the school need, working with the school community council. And so you could have multiple ways that students are being placed into first grade programs at the same time within one district. And so just want to make sure that was clear, just because, and that's the way that many districts are now doing it, because this particular way that we've been accepting students is not as sustainable over time, based on the fact that, you know, the numbers just aren't there. So in order to really maximize the numbers for DLI, if we just made it so that every school could just do what they needed to with their community's help, that would be the proposed idea.
So the question you're asking is, can we have permission to handle DLI enrollment questions at the local level based on the community's needs?
Correct.
That's the question.
You know, I'm aware that Spanish is extremely popular. And has any thought been given to expanding that at all? What problems would that bring?
So that's a
et
great
cetera?
question. I get phone calls about that all the time. The program does not come top down. It comes from the community. They are the ones that need to make the effort to start that grassroots, that they want to have the DLI program in their school. They need to get the PTA and school community council involved. And then there are lots of different meetings before it can even be determined if that school will have it. They have to show that they have enough parent support. So all of our schools have done that, and they have great parent support in those communities. So if there is a community that wants to get another language involved in their schools, they need to start getting the parents involved and get that started.
What we've generally instructed them to do is to have the school community council write a letter to the administration that we would share with the board to make a determination whether we would go forward with that process of surveying and seeing if there's enough interest to do that. And I know there's at least one school that's considering that right now. But so there isn't a formal outlined process because we don't want to create a formal process for something, to request something we can't always provide. But when that question has come up, that's in the last probably 6 or 7 years is what we've asked schools to do, is to get a letter of support from school community council, and we go from there with the board.
So, are there geographic considerations when you say yes to a DLI program?
There are geographic considerations, and the state also is involved in that approval process.
Because I do think that something that's really important to me is making this accessible to every student, regardless of if their school offers it. So, personal story, long ago, I wanted to try to get a Spanish program at my kid's school. And the first place I stopped was a phone call, and I was told, there's no way. The next school over to you already has it. Like, there's just no hope. Is that the case?
I don't like to say there's no hope to any parent that calls, but we have generally not placed programs in adjacent schools.
So for me, that makes having at least some seats available to out-of-boundary students a high priority. And I know considering the needs of each school is important, but is that something that could just exist across the bar?
When you say, is that something that could exist?
Just on our acceptance priorities, I guess, is the way of saying it, but probably not the right way.
The only reason that we would suggest allowing schools to work with teaching and learning to develop their own set of criteria for that particular school is that schools that are in decline in enrollment or smaller schools have different difficulties from those schools that are larger and growing. So it just, if we set rules district-wide, I think we would put ourselves in the same situation we're in, where it works for some schools, but it doesn't work as well for others. We could set...
So are you saying you would take away the priorities we have already when we say, if we were to say yes to this proposal? If you don't want to accept siblings, that school can say no siblings.
Well, I think we could have some components where we say you accept siblings and heritage speakers, and then from there the school has discretion. We could do a blend of something along those lines. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. There are no district rules or the district completely dictates. I think we could find something in between and say heritage speakers and siblings have priority, but beyond that, based on how many students in each category want to be in the program, then the school can make determinations from there to balance out class sizes. Because in the example, you have 11 students that, if everyone were to be accepted, then you'd have 11 students remaining, but sometimes what you have is 34 students remaining. So that's too big for one first grade class and not big enough for two. But if fewer students from within the boundary were approved to be in dual language immersion, then you could naturally have enough students for those two classes, so you could have 2 teachers in that grade level that were not DLI and 2 teachers that were. So I don't know if I'm answering your question well, but I think you could have some components that are key to every school's plan and then allow them flexibility beyond that to balance out the numbers. I think that's what we're really asking for, is either full flexibility or flexibility with some consistent requirements.
And so for me, I would add that as one of those 3. So siblings, heritage speakers, and some number of out-of-boundary students in every program accepted.
So that no matter...
That's a high priority. I wouldn't dictate a percentage. Schools can, but I think that is something that I've hoped our district would fix for a lot of years.
So you would propose that heritage speakers, siblings are into the program, but beyond that, you cannot fill the rest of the program with only boundary students. There has to be an opportunity for out-of-boundary students.
That they get an yes.
An equal chance at that.
Right. If nobody applies, I'm not saying, well, you have to leave those open.
No,
but,
sure. No, I know what you're
But
saying.
I just mean I'd love to see that every child who wants to do this has a fair shot at it.
That makes sense.
That would be a significant departure from our current practice in DLI. So I would like to hear other board members' thoughts on that.
I like the proposal, you know, and I think it's fine also to have some set things from the district, but I like the schools being able to figure out what their needs are and set, and because it seems like it wouldn't even be the same 5 years down the road, or you know what I mean? Like, I think it's nice for schools to have the flexibility to figure out how to best run their programs.
Does that include requiring schools to take out of boundary students?
That I don't have a strong opinion about that, but I do like,
It doesn't make equal access if we don't.
I do like the heritage speakers and the siblings, and I think it's fine to give everybody else an equal chance, you know, but I think depending on what's happening with the school, I think schools, anyway, I don't know what I'm
Let me ask
why I'm going on, but
a question, because if I remember right, the reason the program was set up for boundary students and it was not set up as a magnet program was because you needed the kids to stay in it the whole entire 6 years. And if you were bringing people from out of boundary, those were more likely to drop out of the program. Am I remembering right? Or what's some of the rationale behind making it a boundary program versus a magnet?
When we started out, I think that was part of the rationale. What we find sometimes, and for those families listening, I'm not trying to paint everyone with a broad brush, but sometimes what happens is if you are in the boundary and you choose to leave the program, then you get to keep going to the school. You still are able to be there with your friends and you're still riding the bus or walking, and so there's no inconvenience. But if you've been going for a couple of years and you're in dual language immersion and you're not a boundary student, then you may be more likely to continue there because you've made friends there and you aren't able to continue to see those friends if you go to a school that's more convenient. Whereas the convenience factor is built in for boundary, so either way you stay with the friends and you maintain the convenience.
Okay.
That's not everyone. There's no, for every family that chooses dual language immersion, there's a different reason for doing that and different motivation. I guess we made that rule initially because we were worried about maintaining numbers, but we found that we are able to maintain numbers just through the quality of the program. Is that a fair statement?
Can you summarize for me, summarize the problem or the problems that we're trying to solve with this change that you're asking for? What are the problems that we currently have that this change will solve?
So with Harriman Elementary, for example, with the current guidelines, it will make it very difficult for them to have two full regular classes next year because they only have 67 kids in kindergarten right now. And so this would allow for them to offer more seats first to out-of-boundary students if they want to, so that then they can have full non-DLI classes in addition to the full DLI courses. And then it would allow for schools to accept heritage speakers that don't live inside the boundaries but would like to be part of the program.
And,
like with
don't,
Portuguese.
and don't come in evenly spread throughout our communities.
Yeah, they don't. And so maybe we might have a Chinese family that would like to be part of the program, but they don't live in the boundaries of any of our Chinese schools. And so they might not be able to get into the program if there's not space because they're not in the boundaries. So this just allows for more options for the future, because there could be potential problems that we don't recognize right now that could come up. But if we base it off of the school needs, then they can know what's happening in their community and make those decisions that will best affect their community positively.
And those problems can't be addressed with the current.
We have a
we do
one-size-fits-all policy.
Because if you were to only take boundary students, which is the second guideline, and that we're kind of, you have to stay at that second guideline before you can open it up to other people, that restricts who could potentially sign up for the program first. Let's say it's an out-of-boundary student who wants to come into the program, but they're restricted from being able to sign up for that according to our current guidelines. So if we changed our current guidelines, it would loosen up a little bit and just add some flexibility to who can come in, helping to balance out the enrollment at those schools.
It sounds like this addresses your issue then, Nikki. It allows for out-of-boundary students to be
In the case
considered.
that she used as an example. But what about the case of a school that has lots of enrollment? Then those kids get priority because of where they live. And what I'm saying is, I think there should be some opportunity, and I think the schools can decide based on their needs how much opportunity in order for a student who's maybe doesn't live in the boundary, but their school's not going to be given a DLI opportunity because they're very close to another school who has it. So it would give them an opportunity to, at least at a fair shake. Otherwise, it's like, well, if nobody else wants it, then your kid can come.
But is this better than what we currently have for the problem that you're talking about?
I don't know that in some cases this might help with that problem, in some cases not. It's better than our current policy in terms of what I'm asking for. Not what I'm asking for, what I'm advocating for. I just think it's important that we have equal opportunities for all students who are interested. Your address should not limit your access to programming, in my opinion.
So their proposal allows schools to take out-of-boundary students if they want to. What Ms. George is proposing is that they will be required to take out-of-boundary students, a certain number of out-of-boundary. That's the difference.
Even if they had enough students in their boundary that they could fill it, they would reserve a number that they chose of seats that would allow for out-of-boundary. Does that make sense?
There's also the other perspective of parents who are in the boundary and would like to be in the program and are bumped out from out of boundary. There is an issue that could come up.
And that's my concern, because these do not appear because of top down. We didn't assign that school. We didn't say we're going to put it there. The community at that school built it up. And I would hate to say to that very community, some of your kids can't take it in because this community didn't build it up. And understand the logic is, well, they were told no because of proximity, but it was this community that built that program. And now we're going to limit that community? That's what I have a hard time with. I mean, I get fairness, equality of a program that we instilled. But these are not programs that we instilled. These are programs that the community built up. And now we're going to take space away from that community because a neighboring community didn't build it up.
So I agree with you to an extent, but if we're going to say no to anyone who asks, then I don't know that
But we've never said that.
we have.
We've taken it on a
I've
case
heard
by
it with my own ears
but we've
as
taken
a
it-
parent.
As we take it on a case by case basis. Yes, we say no, but we don't say no without reason.
Right, but because my house is on the wrong street, then my answer is no. I just think, I don't know. I don't feel like it's a huge ask. I know that a lot of these other districts, it says depends on the needs of the school, but every district I'm aware of has seats for out-of-boundary students.
Which is usually the case, but I just wouldn't want a child of one of those communities that built the program up to be denied that seat.
Who had the right address.
That's what I wouldn't want. This community built up this program at this school, and now my son can't go so that that kid can.
I agree with that.
Now, hopefully there's not a problem and we can adjust it. But if push comes to shove, I would give the seat to the community who built up the program.
I wouldn't. I don't think that we can say it's all based on community. If we're saying, we know you're interested, but you can't have it, then I don't think it's based on the community building it up.
I've watched a community build it up, and I know the price that they paid to build it up. And I also watched a community not build it up because of what they weren't willing to do.
I'd be interested to know down the road if there were enough schools that were going to let in out-of-boundary students that there would be opportunities for everybody across the district. It might not be the exact school you want it to be at.
Or even the language you want necessarily, because it looks like there are still seats in Chinese. So, I mean,
And it may be too early to tell, but how many schools do you anticipate needing more flexibility in the near future? If you don't know, that's fine.
Probably one for sure, and it would be nice for the others to be able to offer places to heritage language speakers as well, because there are heritage language speakers around that are not in the boundaries.
A little strange to me to say, because you have this background, you get priority, but because you live on this street, you're off. You don't get it. And I mean, I've experienced this going around and putting my name in every lottery because my homeschool didn't have it. And my homeschool wouldn't have it because I moved in at the wrong time. I advocated at the wrong time. There are just so many things that are out of the control of some of the people who are really interested in helping to support these programs.
I have a question. Are all of the programs usually filled every year? Is this one of the first years where there are seats available in in DLI program?
COVID really hit the DLI program hard because it's hard to learn a language wearing a mask. And so our numbers went down a little bit because of COVID, and we've been pushing to get that back up. And last spring, the district did a big push of advertising. They emailed all the kindergarten parents to let them know about the opportunity to be in DLI, and that really helped boost us up again to be closer to full in all of our programs.
And so what I'm getting at is, if a parent just wanted their student to participate in a DLI program and didn't even care what the language was, they could most likely get into a program, like currently, in the past
couple of years, they definitely could get in.
But we're hoping that that's not the case next year, maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
We're hoping that we can be full in all of the programs every year, but right now, like mentioned, there are some spaces available in the Chinese programs. There are waiting lists for all the others, and some of those waiting lists are just a handful of kids, but others, lots of people on the waiting list, just depending upon the school.
Thank you.
Can you give me just a flavor for what a community has to go through to get one of these programs in their schools? What does the community have to do? What are the parents, families? Maybe just a quick overview of what has the effort that has to be made.
Well, they need to start talking about it with each other, and usually it starts in a school community council or in the PTA, talking about that they want to have this and getting other community members involved. I've heard of communities passing out flyers and then having a meeting, and then like the superintendent mentioned, they need to get the letter from the school community council saying that that they'd like to go forward with it, and then we would hold parent meetings of what that would be involved, what they're committing to, and then just get a lot of interest from the community before we would present to the state that we have a school that's ready, and then the state would then determine the language that would be in that school. So we don't even determine that. The state would determine what language we would have there.
Yeah, so to Bryce's point, someone goes through that process, meetings, talking, forms to fill out. I don't know how you can justify, even though I feel bad for the person at the wrong address, I don't know how you can justify saying, I'm sorry that you had to go through all of that, all those meetings, all those councils, filling out forms, talking to people, all the time you've invested, but we're going to have to pull your son out of the program so that this other person can have a spot. I mean, I think we all feel bad for the person that can't get in, but I don't know how you can justify preventing someone from getting in who's put in all the effort up front.
I think that's why it's important that it be based off of the school needs, because we don't know exactly what will happen in the future. And say they get to a point that they have in the area that they have 60 people who are heritage language speakers who apply, and then that leaves no space for anybody else. We don't know what the future will look like. And so we need to have it based off of the schools and what their needs are, so that then it can allow for the flexibility in their location.
Are the siblings and heritage speakers, are they in boundary?
Yeah, well, not necessarily, because if they got into the program as part of the lottery as an out of boundary, and then they have a sibling that's in 5th grade, they would be given that priority, because we try to keep the siblings, families involved, because it helps out with the program. They are able to speak at home and help each other out. So if they were an out of boundary student that got into the program in 1st grade, then their sibling would be admitted even though they're not in the boundaries.
Like if they've moved, you mean?
Or if they even got into the program
Outside of the boundary in
Yeah.
the first place.
just
Okay.
depending upon what it was like
Year
when they
where
did
that
it. Yeah, the
was
year that
allowed.
it happened.
I'm going to make one more
Or-
point and then I'm going to just be done talking because it sounds like nobody agrees. But the communities that establish programs age out. The benefit of that program remains in that geographic location way past the establishment of that program. And so, but what doesn't change is if interest rises in a nearby school, that opportunity is closed to them. So again, I would just say, like, I really feel passionately that that needs to be a consideration.
And I've been thinking about that too, like maybe if a DLI program is over 7 years old or 10 years old, that I know the community is still a big part of it, but I think it's fine to make a requirement for out of boundary students, just because there are schools that would not, even if there was the community interest and effort, would not be able to bring that to their school. So I think, and I don't know how, it's starting to get really nitpicky in my brain, but like if it's a certain age, then maybe require them to accept out of boundary students. I don't know. So I think that is a very good point, Nikki. So
Yeah, I think to your point, a requirement to accept out of boundary students for me is going to take more discussion and more feedback than what I can decide on tonight. I think there's a lot of complexities to that we may not be aware of, and I would want to get a lot more feedback on that issue before deciding. But does anyone have any more questions?
I had one or two outside of this current discussion.
So in this current discussion, I want to get a feel for where the board is. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. First of all, are you okay giving flexibility on a school by school basis? And then the next question will be, but should we require certain things? So let's start with the proposal. Are you okay giving flexibility on a school by school basis?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, and I would like the AOS very involved.
Okay. Okay, everyone's good with flexibility. I'm assuming the AOS would already be involved. Is that
Probably
correct?
yes.
Okay. Okay, so the next question is, do you want to require certain things? And the first one would be siblings. Before they have complete flexibility, do you want to say as a board, but you have to take siblings first and then you can have flexibility? And I'm a yes on that one.
I'm a yes on that
I'm
one
always
also.
I think
a
it's important to
proponent of
keep families
siblings.
together. Yes.
Okay.
I don't know enough about how
I'm a
important.
no on requiring anything.
Okay.
I think those two are contradictory, and I'm a no on requiring anything.
I'm not sure how important that is to the program, including siblings automatically.
I think it's important for the quality of life, quality of education for families, as far as trying to get elementary school students to different schools. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking. I don't know if it's necessarily going to improve the academic part of it, but I think it's going to improve the overall education experience for students and
Right.
families.
I would think it would improve the academic experience also, because if you have a sibling in your home you can speak to.
I didn't even think
Then
of that,
there's
but that is
more extra
actually
practice
true.
for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems like people are in favor of siblings. How about heritage speakers? Would they get priority even if they're from outside of the boundary?
Yes, I would say yes.
For me, that's contingent on out-of-boundary students receiving seats.
Oh, but then also, I would think if a situation did arise where the whole program would be filled with out-of-boundary heritage speakers. Actually, this is tricky because I think it would need to be something that was looked at again if we ever got to that point. But right now, I feel like yes.
I would think it would be determined by the numbers and how flexible we are with that. I can't see a program being filled with heritage learners and not giving anybody else an opportunity. So I think there needs to be flexibility and wisdom on that issue.
I don't think I like the idea of taking certain groups of out of boundary students and giving them priority. If you're outside the boundary, you're equal with everyone else who's outside the boundary.
Mr. Dunford, did you?
I don't want to say you can do what you need to do and then tell them what they need to do. So I would have no restrictions. If we're going to vote yes on one, I think we need to say, then trust them. If we're going to say, no, we don't trust you, so we're going to impose a couple requirements, then we might as well not give them the flexibility. To me, that's a contradiction. So I would say, I trust them. Do what's right for the program, and I don't need to be involved in that percentage. I don't want to say, here's the rules, because I completely trust them.
And I've got to say that Bryce makes a very valid argument too, because I really, like, in my heart, I love more local control. You know, I feel like schools and school administrators and teachers know what they're doing. So this is really tricky. question is trickier than I thought it would be.
Yeah, and I really like the idea, and I would say yes. Right now, with the numbers that we have, it makes perfect sense. I just am thinking, what if that changes down the road, and what if, what kind of impact might that have if numbers change and then we're not giving them the flexibility they need. So I'm mixed on this one too, because I really like the concept.
Do we have problems in the district when we let schools do things their own way? I mean, so we've got 10 schools. This school's doing it a particular way. This school's doing it a different way. Not necessarily DLI, but just anything. And people that live in this school say, well, they're doing it this way at this school, and I like the way they're doing it. Why can't we do it that way? I mean, do we have issues like that on other things in the school where we just say, look, we're not going to impose any rules on you, you guys just do it however you want to do it? Are there issues?
You've just asked a central question in much of policy administration and operations, because there are many benefits to being consistent district-wide. The permit policy is an example of that. There are some, and the board, of course, recently has reviewed those parameters for awarding permits and really kind of tore it apart and rebuilt it and then revised it in a meaningful way each time that really helped give us direction to administer that. This is a program where, I think to Marilyn's earlier point, I would clarify that we're not just going to say, okay, principal, whatever you want to do, just go ahead and create these rules. I think what we're asking is, what does the board want to put in place and then turn over to the district administration to then work with schools on? Because I think there would need to be a rationale for customizing the approach. And I think we could almost say schools with very similar circumstances are going to use very similar approaches. But the response has been so rigid that we've had to turn people away that logically it would have made sense to allow into the program. So that's a long answer to say many times a consistent process is the best way to be fair. I think in this case, allowing schools to work with district administration to customize rules for the school situation will give better access. Whatever those restrictions are at the board level, I think that will allow us for some flexibility to make some decisions that make a little more sense based on the individual location.
That's why we have a House of Representatives and a Senate. There is brilliance in both of that. Sometimes we need to treat every state like the same, and sometimes we need to say, no, you're different. And we honor that difference.
So I'm wondering if superintendent has any thoughts on this that you'd like to share, or you've already shared them.
I think added flexibility allows us to better meet the needs of families and the school and balance those a little bit better. In the name of consistency, I think we've had to make some decisions that maybe didn't make sense for the school or for families. For me, I think that working closely with the school is something that we can, I think we can make better use of our resources if we have some added flexibility.
Thank you.
Okay, and then does anyone, or who would like to explore requiring out-of-boundary students in? Ms. George-Wood. Anyone else want to look into that further?
And so I would like to change my vote to be more like Bryce's, just all flexibility. And I think that the school administrators can figure out what would work best for their schools, their students.
Okay, so no no,
Yeah, with no
no
requirement.
priority to siblings. Let the schools figure out what their own priorities are.
Yes.
Okay. So I think where we're at is 2 board members say complete flexibility, and 4 said flexibility but give priority to siblings. Is that correct?
I just throw one thing out
Okay.
there. So when a student starts in DLI, their seat can't be replaced as they move on. Like, it would be unfair to say, hey, 4th grader, you can take this opening now for these kids who have had 4 years of studying a language. They would just drown. And so when you talk about splitting up families, it's really important that you make siblings a priority, because families are usually going to say, not worth it. I'm yanking my kid out of DLI and we're going to go where we can stay together. And so for the viability of the program, I think siblings is a really important priority.
And I believe it's a very big priority also. I just also believe that people who are running the programs will see it as a priority and put that into their process. I trust that people will see the value in that.
And I think you're right, but I will tell you, this is a community that I know intimately. It will terrify them if you take that priority away. You will have panic in the streets.
Okay, so the direction then from the board is that we approve the flexibility at the school level with priority given to siblings.
What about heritage? Do we say no to heritage?
That flexibility will be given at the school level to allow heritage. I don't think there was enough people that wanted to require that.
This is just a question. So a heritage speaker who might not know all the grammar and spelling or anything, could they join a DLI program later on, like in 2nd or 4th grade? Or anyway, I'm just curious.
So the current guidelines that I direct to the principals when that happens, that if there's space available in their school, then we try to accommodate them to come in if there is space. So then if we need to, we will also test the students to see what their ability is. In the younger grades, it's still probably a great time to get them in there, because then it will help them with their English learning and everything as they're going along, if they're having their native language spoken all the time. It's more difficult the higher up we get. And so we definitely like to do more testing of them before they get put into the program. In middle school and even high school, they need to pass the AP test to be involved with the Bridge program.
Thank you.
So priority to siblings and flexibility beyond that. Is that correct? Can I ask, and I know you have other questions as well, can I ask about, because I think those listening to this may be asking themselves the question, so how do I get a program at my school? Does the board feel comfortable with that process? Process is overstating it, but with the direction that we give schools that are asking about a program moving forward, that we ask the school community council to write a letter, we bring that to the board for consideration. Because what we don't want to do is survey parents before we've come to the board and to the state to see if it's even a possibility. So what we've done, they write that letter, we come to the board says, yeah, let's get more information. We see if the state will approve it. We see what the parent interest is, and we bring that back to the board. Does that feel like a comfortable process for those schools that may want to see a program in their community?
I was very pleased the way it rolled out at Aspen Elementary. I just thought it was well done.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with the process. And I saw there was a school in my area several years ago that started the process of the community talking, and they had several thoughtful school community council meetings about it, and in the end decided not to ask for a DLI program. I remember that. So yeah, it works
Okay.
But I think it's really important for the school to have buy-in, because it really does affect a lot of things within the school.
Sure. Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, Mr. Barnett.
Question on funding. If a school applies, goes through the whole process, it gets approved by the state, does when the state approves it, are they basically saying, we're going to fund this? Is there funding that comes with it? Or is it just, yeah, go ahead and do it?
There's some funding that comes with it, and I think teaching and learning could address that more effectively. I think there are two costs. There are costs that teaching and learning can talk about. The other cost that is less obvious sometimes is the fact that we sometimes have to add FTE to a school to balance out the class sizes. In theory, if all of the class sizes are perfectly balanced out, then the FTE that you would generate from the students in each of those classes would offset the cost of teachers. But anytime you add another option into an elementary school, then it can throw off the numbers a bit and complicates that. It's already complicated because you may have one grade level where there's a bubble of students that go through that create classes that are just too large for comfort, but not large enough to qualify for an additional FTE. When you add DLI, that complicates that a little bit because you automatically have to have 2 FTE for those DLI classes, regardless of the size of the classes, to continue to offer them. So there is a cost associated with balancing out the FTE in our schools in addition to the costs that are incurred in other ways. So,
And those are costs absorbed by the district?
right.
I guess my purpose in asking the question is, from our discussion, it sounds like DLI is not a required thing. We don't have to do it.
That's correct.
We're choosing to do it, and we're
Right.
meeting the needs or the wants of some of the families in our district. But in the end, it's not something we have to provide by law. We're choosing to, and I think that's great, but it's only partially funded by the state, and everything else comes out of our own budgets. We've talked in the past about budgets, about money, about finances not being enough. Where are we going to get funding for X, Y, and Z? And we've had people talk about trimming the fat, and I've mentioned this before. And I don't want to say that DLI is something that we can cut. I don't want to be misunderstood by anyone who might be listening. But it's things like this that we need to look at from a financial perspective. It's a great thing. It serves a great purpose. It serves a lot of families. But when we need to make difficult financial decisions, we can't say, we have nothing we can cut. This is an example of something that it might be a tough decision, but we have to cut it. You know, families and businesses outside of government, when they're tightening their belts, they're cutting things out that are hard to cut. It's not an easy decision for a family or a company to say, we can't afford doing this anymore. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not advocating for cutting DLI, but it's an example of something that we're doing that we don't have to do and that we're paying for. I guess that was the point that I wanted to make. There is a cost to the taxpayer on
There's
this.
a cost to all taxpayers, even though not all taxpayers benefit from the program.
Right. But it's not something that public education has been asked by the state government to do or to provide. That's just an example. Anyway.
And there are a couple of, I think you hit on an important point. I think we make at least 2 types of cuts, and we do it on a pretty regular basis. I've heard the phrase cutting the fat. And to me, cutting the fat means cutting out unnecessary positions, creating efficiencies without sacrificing options or services. So, hey, can we offer these same services in a more effective and efficient way that allows us to pay less and makes us more efficient and is a better use of our funds? And then and we make those cuts on a regular basis. John and I and cabinet and departments are always looking at ways to do, and schools are looking to do things more effectively. Someone's leaving a position, or we rearrange some people into different positions to get the most out of our resources. The other is, as you said, is to make these difficult sacrifices. So one is saying, this is an inefficiency, nobody's benefiting from this money being spent, let's do things in a better way. The other is to say, we have to prioritize. We can't do everything. And is this something that gives us the value that we're putting into it? And, you know, we've made those difficult cuts over the years as well. There were, this isn't the last time we did it. We do it frequently, like I said. But I remember at the time of the split, we made some difficult decisions where, for example, we had a program that was demonstrated effective at helping our most at-risk students, but we couldn't afford it, so we cut it, and we were able to realize some savings as a result. So I think it's valuable to look at both of those on a regular basis, as you've talked about. Would you like Teaching and Learning to give more information about what's paid for by the state and what those costs are? Or
Just briefly, I don't want to take up any more time, but if there's some quick numbers, that'd be great.
Every year we get a grant from the state. They get the money from the state legislature, and we use the money to help pay for the professional development that the teachers go to and the supplies that they need, the online programs so that they can do Chinese practice at home, or all the different materials that they would need to do the program, the DLI program.
okay, thank you.
Anything else on DLI? All right, thank you. We're going to back up to agenda item B, a review of proposed Title III policy. Welcome Ms. Loveday to the table, and Dr. Anderson.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate this opportunity to come back to the board. This is an ongoing, something we're bringing back after we've discussed it a few weeks ago. This is a policy that we have to put in place as outlined in state law. It was passed a little while ago. That requires us, in order to receive Title III funding, that's language, students with different language needs and families with different language needs is the money we get from that. And it requires us to have a policy in place in order to qualify for that Title III funding. And really, it just underscores the importance to include all parents and guardians in the educational process, regardless of language spoken in the home. And Ms. Loveday will outline some of the minor changes that we made to the policy based on the board's feedback last time, and then also answer any questions we may have. So thank you.
Thank you for the introduction and review of the policy. The only two changes that were added was to add the word is in the sections that we have outlined in sections G and also in section H. So
We've highlighted those in red.
We added those in, and now we can say them, and it sounds beautiful as it's will include but is not limited to, and then the following items below that, as we work to make sure that those items that will be translated and interpreted are included. So that was the only large change, unless after you've had time to read it since we last met, there were other outlining questions.
Is it pretty standard or normal in a policy to use that language? It'll include this, but it's not limited to this. Do we have that in a lot of our policies? It's not limited?
It's not uncommon to see phrases like that, even in state law. I think what it does is it just grants for additional things to come in terms of different, like right here, it says may not be limited to report cards or discipline policies or handbooks or requests for parent permission. Things like that may evolve over time, the way we do things. We may add new technologies, new forms, new other things that may just gives us flexibility to include those without having to do an overhaul of the entire policy.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with language that's kind of open-ended like that, who are we as a board giving the right to determine what that means? You know, that's a question as I was reading through this earlier, I thought, if we don't enumerate everything, and I understand sometimes it's hard to enumerate every possible thing that we could think of, but instead of cutting it off and having explicit language, we're as a board, we're allowing staff, teachers, whoever, their own interpretation. I guess that's a question. Are we allowing a translator or an interpreter to say, well, the thing I need isn't listed here, but it says it's not limited to, so I guess I can do it anyway? Is that what we're saying?
I think that it just lets us be flexible enough. It's not that we're giving broad discretion to the translator or the interpreter, but working through Michelle's office and the director, it allows them to make administrative decisions on maybe how things are done or what it may be limited to. I'm going to give an example of.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, and for example, and then I'll let Paul respond as well. But when outlined, this is so that parents know what their ability to have translated and interpreted for. However, we don't want to put something as large as something that we are not capable to translate for or to interpret for, such as an entire 400-page textbook, right? So those are listed to create the parameters of our ability to support the families. But Paul, you were going to say?
To Mr. Barnett's question, in part, the governing state law requires that the policy delineate a number of these things. So the legislature has said you have to include these certain topics. You can do more, but at a minimum, you have to list these out. So that's why there are a number of things that are actually listed out rather than just a bigger, more broad topic. The policy is required to set forth certain things. And so sometimes that's why we get these policies that seem like we're listing stuff. It's because you as a board don't have discretion not to put those things in.
Those are
why it's the way it is.
The big
Thank you.
rocks that the legislature
Thank you.
wanted to include in that.
The other thing I would include, Mr. Barnett, is if you look at every one of these administrative policies, Section 1 is the only thing that the board really dictates. Section 2 is how the administration will carry that out. So everything in Section 2 is trusting the administration to carry out the board's directive in Section 1. The second thing is we have a very clear policy, and I know the level of trust we give in a superintendent. This is from BSC 203. As long as the superintendent uses any reasonable interpretation of the board's ends and executive limitations policies and specific action or instruction of the board, the superintendent is authorized to establish all further policies and procedures, make all decisions, take all action, establish all practices, and develop all activities. We basically say unless we haven't said this is a no-no, we trust our superintendent to make those very decisions. There's always been a level of trust between boards and superintendents that says, we'll spell out what we think we need to, and we're going to trust the superintendent to make all other decisions.
And I was going to emphasize the same thing, Mr. Dunford. It's a matter of flexibility for the department, but it's a matter of trust in our people.
Question, H uses the word will include, are those the things that were required? It's critical communication.
Yep.
So are those things that are required by law that we have, critical communication pieces we have to provide?
Yep, again,
interpretation
enumerated
for.
by law, you have to include these, but they're not limiting boards to, and administrators to include it solely to those. In the spirit of Constitution Month, I think what Mr. Dunford just said is pretty much the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. Anything not enumerated in the Constitution is left towards the states, right?
Street.
Not stated by the board is left to the superintendent.
Way to pull in Constitution Month.
What did you used to teach, Mike?
Yeah, he just got his history moment. Great.
I love it.
Okay, board members okay with these changes?
Can we ask general questions now?
Yes, of course.
I was nervous before. My nervousness is growing.
Okay.
When are we stretched too thin?
I love that you asked that, and I thank you for always being concerned with our team. The good news is we had a preliminary allocation with additional funds, so we were able to hire a second interpreter. So that's
So
great.
this school year and the foreseeable first school years, you're not concerned.
That's a
Wouldn't
trick
phrase it that
question.
way.
When you phrase it that way, there are concerns just so that we can meet the needs. However, I know that the state readily watches our growth and numbers as we report, and they watch incoming attendance and immigrants, refugees, and they allocate the funding appropriately. So each year you can see with our growth, there's funding to match that each time.
The balloon's not going to pop
No, and then we're
anytime
also
soon.
well, no, maybe it might. Every day is different when we're dealing with human capital and people. However, we are instilling a lot of support within the schools to be able to function when this does happen, equipping our teachers and our staff and faculty. So it's not localized just within our department. And that does require some growing pains. So you might hear from that in the additional schools as they're growing. They're not being bound by us as much because we're kind of releasing them like a child to walk to accommodate. So
Did you
Not
see
worried.
was the influx for this current school year what we expected, less or more?
it was what we expected. It was definitely what we expected. Yes.
And I visited a high school this week that would say their balloon is expanding. It's not popping yet, but it's expanding. And Michelle's team is well aware of that, and they've done a nice job of staying in touch with them. But we're keeping a careful eye on it.
And I think the more we encourage teachers to become ESL endorsed and flip it that way, to put the responsibility back again on the Boundary School to be supportive and making them aware, but we have some systems and professional development in place that will support them as their balloon expands to give them confidence to continue.
And the state is watching.
Yes.
That's mainly what I really need to know is that we're not alone in this.
No, and it's
that
great.
The state watches what's happening.
USBE watches. We readily, at least with the 5 larger districts that have the numbers that are growing, we meet regularly with USBE and Title III and always checking in. And to the fact now the newest conversation is certification for interpreters and translators, and what does that look like and what are the requirements. So the state is supporting and watching and in constant contact.
I volunteered to go on my son's field trip recently, and the teacher reached out to me and said, "Do you speak Spanish? Because we have a Spanish-only speaking student, and the interpreter can't go on the field trip." And I just thought, there's so many of these little nuances that we don't think about, like going on a field trip. And no, I can't send the interpreter on the field trip because the interpreter's needed here,
Or they're not fingerprinted.
or they're not fingerprinted. And it's just, there's so many little things, and I love to see what's happening, and I'm honored to be the district that's absorbing a lot of these. I just, as you know, I'm concerned.
Yes, as we are continuing conversations. And the families are great. The parents of these children constantly reach out. I had 10 phone calls last week about when was our family engagement center opening up in Harriman, and what does that look like, and how we work with other schools like Joel P. Jensen to have a space that we share. So support is being put out there to get those families supported as well.
Does anyone have any other questions?
I have one more. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Nikki.
You
I've-
can go ahead.
I've taken time.
Mine
Go
was
ahead.
more a commendation, but I don't know how many noticed on slide 9 of our survey results for Portrait of a Graduate. Jordan School District communicates in students or families' native languages. That is like the most profoundly positive response on this survey. And we always are going to have people who just disagree with every single one, but the lowest percentage, and I think that should be huge accolades to your department. So thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Thank you.
In section 1, which is the board section, the board directive, it references Utah Code 53G7223. I asked Mike earlier, at the bottom of that section, it talks about on or before July 1, 2023, the state board shall provide the Education Interim Committee a funding projection for annual and one-time costs associated with an LEA's implementation of the policy described in this section. I was curious if we have access to that funding. Do we know what it's going to be?
Yes, we received that preliminary allocation. It won't be available in Utah grants for us to write it up yet, but we know what we're receiving, which is what prompted us to be able to hire that interpreter to start in the next 2 weeks. So that preliminary allocation was sent out probably in April. They sent it out with additional funding that came on top of that for the 5% through Title III. Yeah. Yes.
Is everyone okay voting on this at our next business meeting? Yes. Okay.
Thank you so
Great,
much
thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank
Do you
you.
need anything else from us?
Nope, next business meeting, we'll have it on, and
Okay.
quick recap and any other questions.
Great, thank
Thank you.
All right, we will go back to agenda item E, our legislative priorities. Ms. George.
Thank you. So, as you know, the pre-delegate assembly is met, the JLC priorities are well underway. And at our last meeting, we talked about these meetings that we're trying to start having with our legislators, where we can take that a little closer to home in relaying the priorities that we have as a school district, that we hope we will see some of these priorities addressed in the legislative session. So the Government Relations Committee has spent the last many, many months gathering ideas of things, and there are so many things that we can talk about. We've gotten amazing ideas from a variety of sources, and so what you have on board docs is a list of some of those that we feel strongly are important for us as we fulfill our role, maybe one of the most important roles that we have as advocates with our state representatives. And so what we're asking of you, so we've kind of tried to prioritize, because there's always things that of course we don't want to just slip by that we haven't addressed in the right setting. But the items in the green table are the items that we feel like are items that we feel are a big enough priority that we want to unitedly as a board present those as our priorities for this school year in our interactions with our legislators. So what we asked for everyone to do was to look over these top five priorities, five priorities, and rank your top three. So just for those listening, those are literature selection, focusing on how a book is brought into a school rather than so much focus on getting books out, fully funding special education, add inflation to property taxes so we can support referendum legislation, competitive pay through WPU increase, and funding for counselors and behavior specialists. So hopefully you've all had a chance to look at those in considering your top. So I think if it works for each of you, we can just go around and hear your top three, and then I will just keep a tally, and then we'll present you with a document that represents the board's will on this. Can I ask you, Mr. Demford, to start us off?
You betcha. My number one was competitive pay through the WPU increase. I just think there's so many needs that meets. And forgive me, but my number two was not on the list.
Sure, I can.
I really think we need to continue to say, can we look at, can we talk about, can we have the conversations about impact fees for education? I just don't ever want that discussion to stop and to die out, because there are only a handful of districts who are tooting that horn. And as the rest of the district stops speaking it, we need to speak it louder and louder. I am absolutely convinced that the split occurred because of that. I worry that we're borderline we're approaching another perspective split because of it. We have one side of our district that is seeing tremendous growth and one side that is not. And if we're not careful, that's going to bite us in the end. And so that would be my number two. My number three is to help legislators understand what COVID did to education and how we're still in great need to fix it. I couldn't believe when we had LEAC meet about the superintendent's the rollout of the superintendent. What I heard over and over and over again is behavior issues have dramatically worsened. And we are not getting the resources nor the legislative backing to handle behavior issues. And so that was my number three. Your last one is funding of counselors and behavioral specialists because of the great need that has presented itself in post-COVID education and the worsening of student behavior in the classroom. Those are my three.
Can I back up to the impact fees one? Because I actually had kind of jotted that down to something to add in somewhere. And I'm wondering if we should have the wording be something more along the lines of studying funding for high growth areas, which would include impact fees.
High growth funding mechanisms.
Yes, because yes, that's a good way to word it. I mean, we've got, necessarily existent small school funding mechanisms, and there's lots of things for rural areas. There's really nothing for high growth areas that are having to build schools.
That's a great point. So for everyone who hasn't gone yet, if you want to add that high growth funding mechanisms into your priorities, please feel free to do that. All right, Mr. Barnett, did that throw a wrench in your plan?
No, I'm
You
good.
okay? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
You
Do
ready?
want to? Yes.
Okay, I'm ready.
And if anybody is interested in my notes, you're welcome to look at the living document that I emailed all of you. I've got that. That's where I'm taking all of these tallies, so you're well represented.
My first priority is literature selection. My second priority is funding for counselors and behavior specialists. And my third is fully funding special education.
Thank you.
And mine is number one, competitive pay through WPU increase. Number two, fully fund special education. And three, funding for counselors and behavior specialists. So we're the same, yeah.
My first one is WPU increase, to keep that ongoing and as one of our first priorities. Second, I like what Mr. Dunford said about the high growth funding mechanisms that would impact behavior. That would be my second. And my third would be fully funding special education.
Sorry. So tell me your second one more time.
Well, it's a kind of a combo.
Okay. No wonder I couldn't put it on a right one.
It's a combination of the high growth funding mechanisms that would impact the counselor behavior specialist aspect. Behavior is an issue that we have to face.
Okay. Ms. Miller, do you want to go?
Yeah, my first one was competitive pay through our WPU increase. And second was funding for counselors and behavior specialists. And again, I just think that's really important to highlight the growing need within our district. That our legislators understand that. I have a tie for third.
I mean, I let Marilyn do it, so.
Can I have a tie?
It's your tie.
Fully funding special education. But I would also love to see us add something for the high growth funding mechanisms.
So can I go back and clarify? When I voted for the WP increase, one thing I should have said is I know everyone is salivating at the education, what do we call it? Constitutional amendment. I'm open as long as I'd love to, when I say WPU funding, I mean more of a broad, can you show us your plan for education funding into the future? Can we as a state come up with a viable plan that says we trust education, we know it's our future, we're not going to let that be compromised? We just are sitting on such a vulnerable position, and I hear a lot of people talking about lifting the constitutional earmark, and no one seems to be talking about its replacement. So for me, the WPU discussion is to have more of these discussions as to what does the replacement look like, rather than trust us, we'll fund you.
And it's not just give us an extra WPU increase, we're good. It's what's the long-term
What's the
funding plan in
long-term
exchange
plan?
for the earmark removal.
You got it. That's my number one.
Okay.
So let me ask on WPU funding increase, if we want to say we support USBAs and be specific about that, or if we want some more general terms on it. USBAs is a 13.5% increase, and how that breaks down is 4% for the inflationary factor. That's part of the constitutional or amendment change that was approved prior, and the code change. So 4% that's already built in, and 8% for LEA flexibility to address operational needs compensation, and then an extra 1.5% if the legislature eliminates general and curricular fees. So that's how USBA came up with 13.5%. So do you want to ask for a specific percent, or say that we support USBAs, or put in general terms of our priority is having a long-term plan to support education?
I'm open to whatever plan. I don't necessarily want to dictate the plan, as long as we just start having those conversations about what is best for education in the state of Utah. I really like I really like USBA's attempt to say, the growing trend has been we don't trust WP increases, so we want to do this funding over here because it's going to get to the classroom more readily. And I worry that we've shifted so far away that we're straining the WPU. And so I like the idea of, can we put more trust back in the districts and just maybe go back to a WPU increase? we love what you did here, and I get the spirit of it, but man, you tied our hands in so many ways by doing so. If they understand that, if they understand that, you know, all this other funding tied our hands in these particular ways, and we're just asking for more funding to come back, then I'm okay with however the numbers work out. I just really feel like they put us in a really hard position in the last couple of years. And I know John would agree with that.
And I think we should include some sort of wording about our long-term educational investment. Because I do worry, you know, if we say, well, just give us an extra 8% this year in exchange for the removal of the earmark, that, you know, they can do 8% this year and then nothing for the next 10 years. I mean, you want something, some sort of commitment to future investments in education.
Yep.
And that's because we can't trust the people on the Hill. I mean, we talked about trusting the superintendent and his staff to do the right thing. But we can't trust the people upon the Hill to do the right thing. So we want something in writing. We want something concrete that says, this is what you're going to give us because we don't trust you.
That's a good point. And the legislature has been very generous the past few years. And if it was guaranteed that we could keep those same legislators, then yes. But there's elections every 2 years, and they could all be gone.
History tells
in a year and a half.
tale.
Absolutely.
History
I would just add
is
that
what we're pointing to.
I'm elected to represent the interests of public education. I don't know that they are. They're elected to represent the interests of a state, and that does not always prioritize public education.
I just heard the word trust thrown around a little bit differently. So.
Well, and I think it's a different perspective too, because with the legislature, the hierarchy is we are below them. You know what I mean? As far as they get to tell us what to do. But then trusting administration, I mean, like in the chain of command or whatever, they are subordinate. I don't know. I don't like to say under or subordinate, but in the hierarchy, we get to tell them what to do, and so we get to trust them. You know, so I just think it's a little bit different, and I didn't necessarily need to say that, but
Oh, it's a lot different. We didn't hire the legislators. We hired our administrator.
We elected the
We elected the legislators. We've hired them.
Not necessarily.
We did have a voice.
Not necessarily. I don't, you know, you never know. But they do change.
But well done. Very appreciative of this document.
yeah, I like this. So the thing is, when we see a legislator, one of our elected officials, try to work some of this into our conversation, is that what part, like the orange and the yellow parts, when it says talking points and important ideas we can run past legislators? So
what we've spent a lot of time doing is saying, it feels like every session we're saying, please don't pass this. And so we really tried to focus on saying, here are some issues we could use help with. And here are some things that maybe you're not aware of that's happening. And so we hoped that would be helpful in helping to build up those relationships, because I do think it's easy to get exhausted by this feeling of us versus them, this adversarial, and that's not what we want. We want to partner. We're all elected officials, and we all want to represent children well, I think. And so we do want to try to use any opportunity for someone that we feel like, oh, I wonder if this would be something that this person might be interested in helping us with. But at our upcoming breakfast that those of you who are interested in attending signed up for, we will have a document prepared at that breakfast where we can hopefully at the right timing, and I really appreciated that aspect of the pre-delegate assembly on Friday when we were able to talk a lot about timelines. And so we're trying to be responsive to that and say, okay, in January, it's kind of like showing up at a truth and taxation hearing, right? Like there's not a lot of creative thinking that can happen in that moment. But if we start earlier and we continue conversations through that process, we're hoping that we can find some solutions together. So at those meetings, we will present them initially with our Jordan legislative priorities. And then, of course, the other real benefit we hope from having a smaller group is that it can be more of a give and take instead of this formal presentation where we present them with our priorities, where we can talk to them about their perspectives and ways that we can create win-win solutions. So I don't know if that answered your question at all.
It did. And I really like these talking points because, like you said, frequently I've just thought, what are you doing? And so now this is, hey, it gives a positive starting point. So I really like this.
Thank you. And please feel free as you go to those, like if you're feeling anxious, feel free to review that. Of course, I don't want to script anyone, but if there's something that you're like, oh yeah, I meant to say this in this conversation, then.
Yeah, you phrased these really well. You are an amazing wordsmith.
Oh, you're incredibly kind. Okay.
And did we pick a date for a legislative breakfast for everyone? We've got the dates for our small groups.
Oh,
Can't remember where we
we
left
talked
that.
about one at the beginning of December that I should bring up in this group, but I don't know, Mr. Anderson, did that date work?
We discussed the December 6th. It's a Wednesday morning, and we checked with a couple of schools. There is some availability on that date at, for example, we talked about Hidden Valley Middle School, and they are available on that date.
Perfect. So then I was kind of holding off on the date because I should have reached out to you today, but
Sorry to spring it on you.
no, not at all. Not at all. I should have done that already. So in addition to the fact, and I think our board has always had government relations trying their hardest to invite legislators in to have conversation. Those conversations are still happening. And then we're adding this layer of small group conversations with the breakfast, but we still think it's important to have our traditional legislative breakfast prior to the start of this session. We're proposing December 6th as a date and would love to get your feedback there. If it's just finding that sweet spot before the session when they're not too busy, but it's not Christmas. So does that feel like a date that we could work with?
How early would you do it?
Traditionally, if we said 7,
7:30 is
7:30.
traditional.
I should write that down.
Yeah, 7:30. Although at the middle school, if we do hold it there at the Hidden Valley Middle School, they begin at 8 o'clock. So maybe we could hold it later than 7:30 if we needed to.
December 6th, you said?
Yeah, that's the date we talked about. All of these plans are definitely soft. We just wanted to run them by the board, but
I'll speak up. It looks good to me.
great, thank you.
The reason we were thinking of Hidden Valley is because they have classrooms, right? Is that, we'd want to show that off a little bit?
Right.
We hope that we can say, look at what we're doing with the money that you're giving us on an individual scale. This is what Jordan School District is doing. And so we thought that might be a nice setting for that to happen. We've heard that it is a priority for them to be able to hear from actual students. So we want to make that a possibility in this meeting. So we'll definitely bring more details to you as we incorporate these priorities, and we'll show you the drafts and whatnot. But that's kind of the direction we're steering things. So I know, Mr. Robinson, you kind of, I don't know if you were listening in the car or whatever. Would you like to add your rank choices onto this document, or?
I liked Maryland's.
Oh, golly. Marilyn was the first tie. I didn't know how to write hers. Okay.
I like the tie because it let me pick 4 instead of 3.
You rebels. Okay. Can you remind me more? Sorry.
So I like the
So first was
WPU because I think
WPU.
that gives us the greatest control of what to do, and I like to report back to them what we do with it. I really did like what Bryce was saying about the high growth, and then Maryland tied it to something. I can't remember. Behavior. I like that. And so that gave me the behavior factor of it, which I liked that a couple of you had. And then number 3, remind me, because I wasn't taking notes when I drive. That's something I try not to do.
Special ed.
Oh, yes, special
I was
ed.
just going to say. It
And
was
you know where I
special ed.
stand on that. I maybe flipped those last 2, but
Just because I like to stand alone today, my top priority is going to be inflation to property taxes. I think that's so important to me. So that's my number 1. And then number 2 will be WPU. And then number 3 is counselors for behavior specialists. Counselors and behavior specialists. I know. I just got to keep you on your toes once in a while.
There you go. Keep me guessing.
All right, so I'll send out the results on this. I'm not fast at math like John, but
And then government relations will meet and finalize the document and the talking points and all that, and hopefully bring it back next time.
I did like the positive tone that you took with working with them. I think that's so important.
Okay, thank you. Our next agenda item you're just in time for, Mr. Robinson. That's discussion on a board newsletter, or a proposal for one.
Awesome. So on board docs, I put prior meeting notes. 2 of you weren't on the board at the time, but we had kind of agreed to do a newsletter, and then we kind of had discussions even later. We just kind of lost kind of the direction of what to do. I was talking to Dr. Godfrey, and this is just my opinion, I don't know, but I think that there's 3 prongs of communication in a school district. One comes from administration, specifically the superintendent. One is more, and that's also from schools. So an individual school's communication of what we're doing, and another one comes from the district, and that comes from our communication department. And then the third one comes from really the school board. We're the face of public education. We're elected by constituents, and we have a responsibility to report to them what's going on. And there's no doubt that the first prong with superintendent, what our schools are individually doing, is not only receiving statewide attention, but really national attention, as they have presented at some of the national conventions. And the best form of flattery is when people are duplicating it, and we're seeing districts that are duplicating the supercast and such. And the district, same thing. We just went to a presentation at the Utah School Board's Leadership Academy. They gave a great presentation. I absolutely loved it. They talked about a lot of things that we're doing to communicate. We're doing a great job on social media. Over the years, I've just watched that grow, and and I think things like our peach jar and stuff like that is pretty good. But I'm not sure where we are as a board, and so I think there's 2 conversations. Number 1, it seemed that we kind of, as a board, decided we're going to do something, but we haven't done it. So do we need to decide we want to do something and go back and have the whole discussion again? Or should we have a discussion on what should we do? So that's my question.
Yeah, thinking back, we never really landed on what we were going to do. We had explored a few options. I think we should just look forward and explore some options. I'm very open to adding some type of board newsletter or board communication or some way to talk more about things we're doing as a board. So I'm very open to exploring what that is.
Is anyone opposed to just moving forward and just how can we communicate better?
Was there a proposed distribution of this mechanism? How would it be distributed?
Well, it talked about, we had decided as a board, a quarterly opt-in electronic newsletter.
Electronic distribution?
Opt-in.
It's an opt-in, so I think you could advertise that in a variety of different ways. Postcards, you could do it through Pete's Jar. You can do it on our social media. There's a variety of ways to gather information, because I'm just thinking that if I have a kid at the school, I can get connected to what's going on. But if I don't, which will soon be me, I still want to be connected and know what's going on in the schools, and it's a little harder for maybe someone who doesn't have kids in the school to know what's going on. We sometimes will run and try to communicate better when we need something. When we need a bond to pass, or when we need a truth in taxation's coming up. We tend to want to communicate better, but at that point we don't have the list of people who are interested in being communicated with and the mechanism set up to distribute reliable resources that they can trust.
So on the recommendations, or if these items can be reasonably accomplished, at the bottom, it seems like number 4 is already happening, and it also an electronic opt-in summary of board meetings. Minutes are available to the public. Like what more would be added to the summary? What are you thinking?
Let me give you an example. We recently had a presentation about 2 different topics kind of wrapped into one. Number 1 is the fact that Jordan District and the state of Utah really should receive a lot of congratulations for our learning loss was much less than most people. And specifically during COVID, the learning loss of the Jordan District was even maybe better than, if you look at other districts. I want everyone to know that.
Was that in a board meeting?
Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, we talked about our scores on Walk to Read.
Oh,
and
okay.
Our scores of Walk to Read has really kind of been the cornerstone to now this new literature curriculum that we just recently approved. So I want every single person that lives in our school district to know things like that. Like, they've got to know that, because what happens is people get a misperception that, there was a lot of learning loss during COVID, because that's what they're hearing nationally, right? And they don't understand that, nationally that's true, but we actually did a lot of things with our virtual academy, with synchronous. That was one of the most brilliant things we did during COVID, was the synchronous schedule when students were signing on at the same time as class would start. And there's just great things that were done, but I don't know that if you just grabbed a regular patron, they would know. I'm not even sure if you would grab a regular patron if they would know exactly who their board member is. And I want everyone to know who their board member is, what they're doing, and just how hard we're working, and just what great things are happening in our schools.
So do you want to take the opt-in part out then, if you want everybody to know? Because I think that not everybody would opt in.
Yeah, I don't really want to inundate somebody that doesn't want to be informed. A good example of this is our legislators. Many of our legislators have an opt-in newsletter that they'll send out at a regular interval that's saying what's going on. So as a constituent of theirs, I can either go and get a copy of that and have it come to my email, and I can pay attention to what's going on, or I can opt out and I just don't sign up. But by opting in, you're saying, I would like to be informed.
And I received some of those emails from elected officials. How do they pay? Who puts those together? I shouldn't say how do they pay, but who puts those together, and how do they email them out? Do you know? Do they do it themselves? Because from some it seems like they do it themselves, and some it seems like they might have some help. I don't know.
Yeah, they have interns and stuff, and we could explore that. Like, I think it'd be great to go to the university and get like an intern that's a communication specialist or someone like that, or even somebody interested in schools. So there's a variety of ways. I know that our communication department has a lot to do for the staff that we have.
Okay.
So adding a lot without giving them the resources to do it might be difficult unless we give them more resources or we figure out another way to do it. And I think that's where we got hung up before, is who does this? How do we pay for it? But the electronic part makes it affordable, right? Because it's then just time.
And I also have a question, like with number 3. Does that mean making social media accounts for the board that are like Jordan School District Board of Education accounts, or?
So I included in the documents what Alpine's doing and Canyons are doing. So these are hitting, I don't know how they're doing it. We may want to talk to them. These are hitting the social media accounts of individual board members on the night of the board meeting. That's how quick they're going up there. So they're just making it available for board members to post, or they're posting it on their sites. But you'll notice that what I like a lot about it, I like the ability to click on a link and send you to additional information. Has little, on the Alpine one, it has a little truth in taxation QR code that you can go and get the PowerPoint presentation. So it'd be really easy for us to then, and I'm not saying it has to be available that night or early the next morning even, but there should be a way. I mean, they're getting these out pretty quickly, so maybe we could certainly connect with them and find out what they're doing. But
So it sounds like an electronic type of document that each individual board member could share on their own social media account.
and can be shared on our district one too.
And our district is putting out our Board of Education summaries.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I think these other examples that you've sent are just, they're visual. They're more visual for a social media post.
The third one was Granite School District, and I think Granite School District does a lot what we do. There they are. If you know where to look for them, here's a great thing. And I love that, by the way. I love the fact that we're currently being broadcast, that I could listen to it when I was late today. I can listen to it on the way. I can go back and re-listen to it. And I love the fact that we index those, and they're indexed the next morning. So when somebody calls me and I can say, hey, you don't have to listen to the whole meeting, here's the link, and it takes them right to that point. And they can listen to the whole meeting if they want. They have nothing to do, but if they are interested in just a certain topic. So somehow, how can we take those, what we're already doing, and make it a little more effective and grab a little bit more communication out there? That's what I'm asking.
So I agree. I love what we're doing. So
Yeah.
I love what we're doing also.
fair and effective.
And,
yeah.
and it seems like a lot of effort to grab a little bit more attention isn't the right word, but to reach not very many more people. It's hard for me.
Remember that when
foresee-
our bond doesn't pass, though, because we have other truth in taxations, other
don't say our
bonds.
I feel like that's a negative way to speak.
But those are things that are happening to districts all around us, that their bonds aren't passing. And that's the reason why they've stepped it up and are communicating at a higher level.
Well,
These are
Alpine's
examples.
bond did not pass, and they have a very nice newsletter.
They
And
started this
so-
right after it didn't pass.
Oh,
And that's what I'm trying to say is, do we want to wait till we need the public to educate them? Or do we want to provide a way to kind of build the audience as we go? And when we had the Lighthouse surveys, we listened to all the misunderstandings that we had about things that are happening in their district. And I'll just say I was guilty of that. Before I got on the board, before I really paid attention, I thought, we built Taj Mahal buildings. I thought had no idea that we built schools at such a ridiculously smart way. I had misconceptions about over administration, had no idea that our administration costs are so low, or our building costs are so low. And So that's what I just want to shout from the rooftops, that the Jordan School District is leading the way in so many ways. Why wouldn't we want to do that?
Most of the information in these proposed newsletters, I'm guessing, will be available somewhere on our website. This is just a way of gathering it together, presenting it in a nice package, so that so they don't have to go searching for it all over the place. Is that?
But let's be clear, this board does not have a website.
Yeah.
The district
No.
has a website.
Yeah.
And they do a good job maintaining it, but this board does not have a website.
We have a board page on the district's website that has our contact information and our policies and.
So one of the issues I think we've been debating for years is, how does the board convey its information up and beyond the way the district conveys its information?
So one question I have in looking over these examples, some districts are doing a Board of Education meeting summary, so it's just very specific to here's what happened in our meeting last night. Are you looking for that type of thing, or are you looking for more of a newsletter, like quarterly newsletter that has, you know, here's some of the highlights of the great things our board's done over the last quarter?
Well, and I saw up at the top student and school recognitions and team recognitions as part of it. Was that?
I don't have an agenda here, except for I would like to do as well as our superintendent in our district. And I just think that we could do better. So what that looks like, how we get that, I'm willing to explore it more and figure out whether the districts are doing. We could do an ad hoc committee. We can figure out funding. We can figure out time. We can figure out all that if we want to move forward. But I just think we could do more, and I think we must do more, because we need to make sure that the public has correct information in their hands, because there's many important decisions that they will be making on our behalf in the future.
You're just looking for what's our next step? What can we do to better communicate? You're open
Correct.
to any and all ideas
Yep.
for that.
I'm interested in pursuing that as a board.
I am not.
Okay. Richard, Mr. Dunford.
I have, from the beginning, have been very much, how do we communicate better? I just don't know how to overcome the obstacles, so I am always for talking about it and finding a way. There are some very legitimate obstacles in our way, and I don't believe they're unsurmountable, but I think it's going to take a considerable effort to overcome them.
Okay, so there is
But
interest.
I'm all for it.
Yes, and exploring what's next and what can we do? What else can we do? On top of everything that's great that we're already doing. So what's the next step?
I think probably like Daryl mentioned, an ad hoc committee that would look at what options and what would be reasonable and practical.
Good suggestion that can explore the obstacles and, like you said, explore what's reasonable.
I want to be on it.
Should we set up an ad hoc committee? Everyone in agreement of that? Hey,
I'd like to be on it. I don't need to chair it.
all right, we can just contact me or a member of the executive committee if you'd like to be on that ad hoc committee. And we will discuss that and bring it back to you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your support.
Great, thank you. Let's take a break. Yes, we'll take a 15-minute break.
Not that long.
Okay.
That means we're only halfway done.
That's what our breaks mean, right?
Yep. Okay, 15-minute break.
Not counting.
Okay, welcome back. Our next agenda item is a review of the Utah School Boards Association Leadership Academy. Board members just returned from that. 4 of us attended that, along with Dr. Godfrey, and so we wanted to give board members an opportunity to recap what they learned, and share some of their ideas with other board members. I do want to recognize Sandy Reescraft and Doug Flagler and Anthony Godfrey, who did present a class on, it was the power of positive, but it's on communication with our communities. And it was an excellent class. And I was on the committee for the whole conference, so I've been able to read all of the surveys that we got back of the reviews, and there were tons of positive comments about that class. It really was an excellent class and very well received. And so grateful for them for presenting. And if you haven't heard, they've been selected to present at NSBA again this year. Yes. So they're outstanding presenters and in high demand. And it's great to have them in our district. Okay, Leadership Academy. Is there anyone that would like to go first?
I can. I will be brave and go first. Okay. So I got a lot of really what I think are good ideas from the Leadership Academy. One of the classes the breakout sessions that I attended was about micro-credentials. And I think that Jordan School District already does some things like this, but I would really like to explore the micro-credentials process, where it's a type of professional development and way of getting skills. And that's just the buzzword for that one, micro-credentials. Another class that I went to was really great. It reminded me about the purpose and of being a school board member. And but then one thing that I really liked in a teacher retention breakout session that I went to, the concept of hedonic treadmill was talked about, how teachers are on this hedonic treadmill where it's impossible to get satisfaction because, and an example is with test scores. So if a test scores improve, then we can't be happy with that. We have to improve them more. Or if something improves, we just can't ever be satisfied. And I really liked what they talked about. Like, one of the important things for teacher retention is crystal clear expectations for faculty and staff. And I thought that, anyway, I've heard that from teachers also. And I also enjoyed the class from our school district, the Jordan School District Communications Department. It was really, really good about how to control the flow of information. And, well, I mean, that doesn't sound quite right, but to make sure that positive things are focused on as well as just the regular things, but more positive things are happening than negative things in most school districts. So I've rambled on enough about what I learned, but it was a really good experience, and I feel like I got some really good ideas and some reminders from the conference.
Thank you. Ms. George?
So the thing that is really valuable to me about this specific conference is the smaller setting and the opportunity that we were given, especially this year. I think maybe more so than when I've gone before, that we really had a chance to hear from each other and to glean great ideas from people on the ground. And that was so valuable to me. So, I tried to spend a lot of time in classes like that. So one that I went to was a negotiations class where we just got a chance to say, how do you run your negotiations? What do you do? What's your format? And some really great takeaways from that, you know, talking about setting the stage, about the way that the board can arm the superintendent and business administrator to walk in with a lot of ability to make decisions. And some of these districts are doing it in one day. I mean, it was mind blowing. So, so I thought that was really helpful. Another one that I was really interested in was just called How We Do Committees. And they did a panel of 3 different districts and talked about what they, the way that they do committees. One that really rang with me was one of their boards forms committees based on their strategic model, which I think is a great way for us when we've invested all of this time, the manpower, all of the hours and money that will go into creating our strategic plan. It's so important to me that we then are acting on that plan all of the time, that it's guiding our decisions, and that it's not just a document gathering desk in the corner. And so I thought that was a great idea to form our committees based on that model. It was really interesting to hear how members are selected, and some of the committees that were almost across the board in districts that we don't have. So that was really interesting. Of course, I got to go and cry in Sandy, and all of our district always represents so well in theirs. And I was walking and going, is this the best use of my time to come here? Because I've seen it, I think. And I passed a friend who was coming out from another district, and she said, well, I hope you brought your tissues. And so I was like, yeah, I need to go. This is going to be different enough that it will be really good. And no matter how many times I've listened to that presentation, I come away with things and just a massive appreciation for the talent that we have in our district. I feel sorry sometimes when I hear them train, because I'm like, but the thing that nobody can replicate from our district are the people. And man, we have amazing people. And then maybe among my favorites was a class that Miss Miller actually was hosting called Speed Dating. So they just had this poll. When you got into the class, you chose the topics on this list that were of interest to you, and then they just set a timer and you talked at your table about these topics. So it was really pertinent to what we're dealing with as board members and really helpful. In my session, it was hard not to stay through all of them because everyone would have been really different, but in my session, we talked about how do you make the end of the school year count, those last couple of weeks when testing is done, and how do you make that a really powerful learning time for students. We talked about school start times and attendance. So you can hear, like, those are all things that are just constantly before us. So it was great to get lots of perspectives and ideas. And I didn't get to stay through the whole micro-credentials class, but I loved the idea that was presented of a board. Instead of doing like a book study like we've done in the past, a board was doing a micro-credential class option altogether as a school board. And I thought that sounded like such a fun thing for us to experience together. Something I definitely wanted to take back and talk about as a group.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson.
There's a lot. And just the opportunity to meet and talk to other school board members around the state, to be able to talk to them about common, things that we're dealing with and their solutions. It really helped me, especially in our exploration of some of the committees that I'm on. So that in and of itself, the leadership that we began with, just to be able to talk through some tough situations and see how other people are handling them is great. And then the one-on-one conversations are just, you can't really replace those. So I'm grateful for all those board members around the whole state. And but the whole time that Kirby Hayburn spoke, I just thought of Marilyn. He was student body president at Alta in 1995. I taught there before and after, But he talked about all of his heroes, and they were all the people that you and I really know, those leaders of the school. And it was really interesting that he gave this quote. He says, "People and pigs need to know that they're loved." And he got caught in a situation where he should have been suspended, and the principal, understood him and what he did, and kind of gave him some grace and understanding. And he was student body president the next year. And, and so it's that we're dealing with people. His theme really was love, lift, and lead. And everything that he talked about, was something that I connected with. Even he talked about Ryan Little, who's a producer for films, and I taught him in seminary. And he talked about the Inglewood, Chicago project, where it's a really tough part of Chicago. And I remember stopping for gas there with my family, and my wife won't go back to Chicago anymore because of that. But it was really cool because the guy moved in there, and that's what he says. You have to be fully vested. And the guy moved in there and is making major changes to that community and doing some wonderful things. And so anyways, it was really good to be able to have somebody that I didn't personally know, but I personally connected with almost every single one of his stories. And if that's all I heard for the whole week, it was very valuable, and my life will be forever changed for what he said. But I just loved his ending coming. He says, "We're just one person, but we can make a difference, but we have to be planted there." Anyways, I also love the speed dating presentation where different topics were there. It was fun to be able to kind of brag about some of the things that we're doing, like with our late start, our hybrid schedule for times, the start times. And, we talked a little bit about legislative work and some other issues. So that was really, really powerful for me. I really loved where they talked about connecting with your representatives. This was just a really positive, being proactive with legislative work. We are elected by the same people who elected them. And then it talked about, are we making a close relationship? I'm kind of a unique person because I live so far south in the district that I've been linked with people who aren't traditionally thought of as Jordan School District representatives. Like Cindy Davis from the state school board is my representative, and she represents a little part of Bluffdale and a little part of Harriman and a whole bunch of Utah County. Same with Thatcher from Tooele. And so it gave me kind of a realization, am I connecting with all those or just the ones that are big with our district? And so I just want to make sure that we're connecting with everybody. I just love what our district did and what they talked about, and just simple communication tools can help us trust and grow our relationships. And I just thought that was so powerful. Trust is something that we earn, and strong relationships are built over time. And that's why I present the idea of building a board newsletter to get that trust out there with the public. And we're doing such great things. Another statement that was made by our district is everyone who walks in our door is our customer. We often forget the customer, parents. Being a parent is their main job. And so we're just there to support them. But we need to tell those positive stories to those who are not in our schools. There's so many people in our community that don't have firsthand knowledge of what's happening in our schools, and we just need to share that. So the crucial conversation is always one of my great ones. I think it's an area that I continue to try to work in. A couple statements I wrote down: in heated conversations, brains tend to look for differences. And the best negotiators are people that start with similarities. And when they find what's similar, then they get on the same page, and then they can work out those differences. And I sometimes do that. I get in the heat of a conversation instead of saying, wait, stop. What do we agree on? And I think that most of us will agree on more things than we disagree. And so that's just something that I just need to continue to do. The one on board committees was also really important to me. I think that we could continue to look at that and look at other patterns that other districts are doing. We tend to have long meetings and a lot of meetings, and so we can probably learn from some other districts. Chad Hymas was also great. I got to feel his pants and his shirt, which is way cool. He had me come up, and it was really interesting to know that, this guy in a wheelchair has to do so many things different than what we would just, I mean, even like shaking his hand and those things, that it was really interesting to just, that guy is amazing. I just love this one. A lot of people are just people out there that are robbing air. They're average and replaceable. And we just need to kind of rise above it. We don't need to compare ourselves to other people. That's the thief of all joy. And I just loved what he said about his father. His father never told him he loved him. He showed him. You know, it was his actions, not his words, that he found that he loved him. And so I also was involved and walked around to a lot of the different TED Talk classes, and the micro-credentials was very interesting. So, I just got a little snippet from each of them. But anyways, very well worth the time. It was great. I love conferences. I always come back a better board member, but also a better person. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Godfrey, you were teaching a class all morning.
The class I wish I could have attended was the discussion that you held.
Was the one that I was
Yes.
facilitating? Yeah,
In
they
the
were both at the same
afternoon.
time.
Yeah, it was the type of conference where you were just wishing you could see more, but it was well organized. The TED Talks where you had a chance to sample presentations, and then after a 5-minute sample decide which one you wanted to go to was really helpful. And I liked the micro-credentials, and we will be getting more information about exactly what GeoIB does with that. And I learn a lot in the hallways and in conversations that I have with other superintendents and other board members. There was a lot of that, and a lot of great conversations with people I haven't spoken with at length previously. So, and it's just great camaraderie with board members from Jordan, and a chance for us to get a little bit of time to have discussions about things and catch up. So anyway, I'm always impressed at how USBA puts things together, and they just do a great job of it. So thanks to Tracy, who was part of organizing it and putting it together. That just went very smoothly, great use of time, and it was packed, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. with an hour break.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it was. Yeah, so it really
All day.
makes the most of our time. So thank you.
Good. Thank you. My favorite event was the 5K Saturday morning, and I don't run, but so there was a bunch of us that didn't run actually. Lisa and I were walking together, but we were just in a group with just people from all these different districts. And as we, spent time walking for an hour, it's like, well, how do you guys handle this? And how do you handle that? And just, it was so informative to be able to make those connections. Most of the ones I went to have already been talked about, so I won't repeat that. The one TED Talk that I did go to that we haven't talked about yet, though, is the one on the constitutional amendment that will be on our ballots next fall to change the distribution for the school trust fund money. And we'll get more information about that down the road, but it will be, the legislature has voted to put it on the ballot. And up until 2016, that trust fund was distributing just interest and dividends, which is no longer the way that investments work. And so in 2016, there was a constitutional amendment where we changed it so that there was a formula with that included an average trailing 5-year average market value and a cap of 4% that could be distributed. Well, this past year, that fund has grown so much and has been invested so well that we came up against the cap this year. So the fund could have distributed more money to schools, but couldn't because of this cap that is in our Constitution. So there will be an amendment to raise it from 4% to 5%. It doesn't mean the distributions will go up a whole percent. It'll take several years to hit the 5% cap. But just that the trust fund has been so successful, and we've all seen the huge benefit that it is in all of our schools, and how important that money is, and it just keeps growing. And again, just being able to interact and get new ideas from other boards is so helpful. And then I also leave this conference, and every conference, grateful for our board and our district. We do a lot of things really, really well in our district, and a lot of people are asking us questions and wanting to learn from us too. and we work very well together as a board too. So I always leave with a greater appreciation too of what we're doing. Okay, anyone have any questions on Leadership Academy? All right, let's move on to board and superintendent reports and comments. Facilities, do you have anything? You've got a lot in closed session under property.
We've got a lot in closed session, so I'll leave it for that. Thank you.
Okay, finance.
Finance will be meeting next Friday, but I wanted Mr. Barnett to report. He attended the South Jordan RDA meeting on the 11th, Monday or Tuesday? Monday. And that's a unique experience that I don't know very many board members have attended. So I thought I'd just kind of ask him to share thoughts, observations, what impressed him. Would you mind?
No, not at all.
Just so you're, South Jordan's probably our most active of the communities in terms of inviting us to RDA meetings and keeping us updated. But when you realize the depth of the projects that we've been involved in and their impact on society, you realize, wow, that's a surprise. So I just wanted to ask him to report, and that'll be our only finance issue.
Okay. Yes, there was a lot of terminology that I've kind of heard in meetings, in finance meetings, and in here, and it still hasn't all gelled yet.
I'm
But-
6 years into it. It still hasn't all gelled with me either.
But it was definitely interesting to sit in on this meeting. I participated remotely. John Larson was there in person. We were the only two from Jordan School District. Yeah. Bryce mentioned, if anything impressed me, one thing that stood out is that it lasted an hour. It was
Awesome.
very well run. They stayed on schedule. That was a nice surprise. I didn't know how long I'd be participating in that meeting, but a very efficient, well-run meeting. I enjoyed that. It was also eye-opening to know that I think it was, South Jordan, they had, 12 to 20 projects. I don't know exactly how many there were, but a huge document. Brian was his name. What was his last name? Priest. He ran the meeting, and he talked just briefly about each of the projects, the property development type projects that they were currently involved with, and just gave some statistics on them and how it affected the different taxing entities. I guess just overall, it was. I told John afterwards that it was good for me to be exposed to another aspect of the district, to understand our relationship with other taxing entities, our relationship with cities, and the importance of, we've talked about this a little bit in past meetings, but the importance of having amicable relationships with these entities. I got the impression that John was well respected in the meeting. That speaks highly of him and of the district. So I was happy to see that as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Government relations. We've already talked a lot.
We have talked a lot. I'll just add that we were able to meet recently with Representative Stenquist to be able to talk about his political neutrality bill that he's putting together and working on for this session. We had a really great conversation. I was surprised how long he was willing to give us his time and how open he was to feedback. I saw lots of notes being taken and really appreciated his time in that.
Thank you. Joint relations for ESP.
We don't have anything for them.
Okay. GIAC.
They debriefed from a conference. The people who attended a conference debriefed from a conference they had attended, and there was some really, really good information. And there was a presentation given about the difference between calling people out because of bad behavior or calling them in. And I thought it was really great. And something that is interesting is in neither of those calling out or calling in is there judgment placed on a person's on a person, you know, that it's just on the action or the words that they said. And I thought that was really great. And I missed the fall family fair, but my husband and daughter went and they had such a great time. And I plan on mentioning it at the business meeting, but the Language and Culture Services put together a really amazing event that a lot of people really enjoyed. Even superintendent participated. So, and anyway, and my daughter keeps wearing the blue light glasses that she got there to school, and it's really cute. So,
Great. Thank you. JPAC.
So I do have something on that. We would like to kind of schedule a meeting. So most of them are forming their school community councils right now, and I think they have to have the chair elected by the 20th of October. And we have fall break right after that. So we're looking at somewhere in November. Mike, we talked about this. Did we have a day? We didn't pick a day. I have a short memory. So anything like the last, I mean, you got Halloween, you're not going to do it on 31st probably. So like, does anyone have a preference of when to hold that meeting? First week of November or second week of November probably.
Do you have a day of the week that you're aiming for?
No, I'm good at almost any night. We have
so on the 8th of November, there's tentatively, and I think GIAC open house on the 8th in the evening or the afternoon. So
we probably want to stay away from that maybe.
7th might be, I mean, it's election day, but other than that, it's a Tuesday, so.
Is that election day or was election day postponed? I was hearing that they pushed that back further.
Oh, you're right, it's the 21st now. It is the 21st. They did push it back. Okay.
So can we have it just be our JPAC election night?
So anyway, the 7th would be.
Let's do the 7th. And then did we have a certain time? What did we do in the past? I can't remember. 4, 5,
It was later.
later? We probably have some people that work and stuff for if it's school community councils. I have a 4:30 to. Five too early? Why don't we just tentatively put it 5 o'clock and then I'll confirm it and we'll kind of ask around and see. And then we probably would want to know some topics, who wants to be involved, all that kind of thing, so.
Yeah, just something, I mean, it's still a couple months away, but something to keep on the radar for that is I'd like to find a way to at least update them on our Portage River Graduate Strategic Plan process. And depending on where we're at in the process, could get feedback on some things, but we'll have to talk about it. And anyway, let's keep that on our radar as a possibility for that meeting. It would be great to have their input and involvement on what we're working on.
Yeah, that'd be a great one. A couple others I thought of, we're working on the sensitive library materials policy. If that's not done or whatever by then, would be great. And certainly curriculum selection. So there's a lot of really good things that we can talk to them about. But so we'll do that, and then another one in the early spring, late winter. So that's it. if you want to be a part of that, I don't, or have a certain format, let me know.
Okay, LEAC.
I
Start of
am
a new
seeking,
year.
I'm seeking the board's approval. I propose that all LEAC members that were elected last year for their first tenure be retained and all others be replaced. Last year, 25% of LEAC had been on LEAC for 4 years. I think the idea was there would be much more of a rotation. So I would like to propose that the board give me permission to reach out to principals and invite them to hold re-elections for LEAC members who have served for 2, 3, 4, or more years. And that I will use our same election instructions that we've used in the past. That would be my proposal. I would like to get that ball rolling now that school has started, and I'd like to have it lined up by the time we have another, study session. I'd like to be able to say, we have LEAC all set up, ready to go.
So if they served last year, they can stay on.
If they were elected last year,
Okay.
if last year was their first year, they can stay. Everyone else needs to be replaced.
So it'd be like a 2-year office.
That was the original intent, is that you would be on for 2 years. But we have a lot of people who have been on for 4 years.
And can they be reelected?
That
But
would
some-
be, that
but
would
if-
be my proposal.
So if they've been on for 3 or 4 years and their school wants to vote them on again, we're going to say no. It needs to be someone new.
I would like to see someone new.
We don't, and this has been true with a lot of committees we've set up in my tenure as a board member. We don't want these positions to be inherited for lifetimes appointments. And they sometimes get that way because they serve, they love it, they're communicating. And they're willing, but we also then run the risk of becoming stale and stagnant. So I support that.
And I think there's others willing to. They may not speak up because the one person is doing it, so we'll just let them type of thing. Okay, is everyone okay with that if we go that direction then?
Can I ask one more question? What about in 2 more years? Can I get reelected if there's a space of time that I haven't served? What's your intent that way?
I don't know, but right now we haven't seen that. As of right now, we've seen a quarter of LEAC has never sent a different representative.
We can cross that bridge when
We can cross that bridge when we come to it. But as of right now, I just see in a little bit too much longevity for my comfort. So with your permission, I will get that rolling so that next study session, I'd like to put an agenda item on that we discuss LEAC's first meeting at our study session. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, JLC hasn't met, although the delegate assembly did meet, and want to thank everyone that came to that. Thank Brian and Nikki and I voted, and Lisa came too, and Daryl came, and you were there the night before. So yeah, really good representation from our district, and at the delegate assembly, a really good representation. Our Jordan board's never been one to sit quiet during the delegate assembly, and that was true again this year. We spoke up and made some motions, and were successful in some areas. So anyway, the legislative priorities have been approved, and they should be sending those out within the next week or two, the final copy of those legislative priorities from USBA. And then they also voted to move delegate assembly next year to June 7th and 8th, so instead of the end of August. So again, it's back to this discussion of let's get our priorities done early so that we can work with legislators over the summer as at the time when they're actually starting to think about bills and file bills. So that's the logic behind it.
I brought a little shame onto the district at that meeting. I think I spoke out of order right at the beginning. He asked, are there any there was, I didn't realize it was like a make a motion, be recognized by the chair type of a meeting. And no one had said anything yet, so I just blurted something out. And then I realized, oh, this is a more formal procedure here.
I don't think you brought any shame on us, though.
Okay.
Shame.
You started
I'm
a
not chastised too.
you
so
started a good
you're with
discussion,
me.
so
No shame.
no shame, exactly.
A lot of people called me about that, Brian.
Did they?
No.
Okay, Jordan Education Foundation. Have you all received an invitation to the Economic Summit, September 28th? Okay, great. That is coming up morning of September 28th. It's here at the JTC. It's always a really good summit, and it's also a good opportunity to interact with a lot of our community members, city.
And it's very informational.
Yeah, city council members are there, and chambers of commerce and legislators and business community, and it's a great opportunity to interact too, and always a good program also. So that is coming up from the foundation. PTA.
So Tracy and I both actually attended the region kickoff. It was great to have a few minutes to talk a little bit about issues in our in our district, and it was a great beginning.
Salt Lake Academy Board.
We just would like to bring in the new director and introduce him at some future meeting. So if we put that on our agenda, and we're just in transition, we'll do some things. I'll reach out to you, Dr. Godfrey, on a couple things. So.
Salt Lake County Parks and Rec.
I wasn't able to attend the last meeting, and there's a meeting tomorrow.
Utah High School Activities Association.
Our next meeting is in November, but I did sit in on some eligibility hearings today that were quite interesting. So, yeah.
Determine if they can play? Yeah. Okay, and then Utah School Boards Association. We have a fall region meeting coming up. That's September 27th. And I don't know if those invites, have you guys received anything about that yet?
Yeah, I got it on email today.
Okay. Okay, September 27th, 6 p.m. at the USBA office is for our region, but if you can't make that night, you're welcome to go to any of the other regions' nights if you want to. And that meeting is to present the legislative priorities that were voted on, also present the USBA strategic plan, and then just, update you on things USBA is working on heading into the legislative session. So that's always a good event. And the other thing USBA is working on is just promoting more of the positive in education. And they've put together a theme every month, and districts are supposed to push out videos that are matching these themes. And I know the superintendents have talked about that also, but anyway, I'll get a copy of that and send it to you. And that's all for committee reports. Does anyone, superintendent, do you
We have an ad hoc committee that's working still on the sensitive library materials, and we've met, and we'll meet again tomorrow. So if anyone has anything, I think we're making some good headway.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee reports or board member comments?
I have a personal request seeking the board's approval. In December, Apple reached out to our district and invited them into one of the local, in December of last year, they invited us to come into a local Apple store before business opened and kind of interact with education leaders, show what Apple's doing in education, kind of gather some information about what Apple could do. That led to the superintendent being invited to Cupertino at a very exclusive invitation to come and meet with Apple about education. And we have received a follow-up invitation to come back to Apple headquarters and hear what Apple's doing in education and share some thoughts as to what we could contribute to help them better understand education, and I have been invited to attend that. So, as per policy, I am seeking the board's approval to attend with the superintendent in November a meeting at Apple headquarters in Cupertino. And it's really serious, and I'm really reluctant to go, but I'm willing to go.
Okay.
Twist your arm.
So with the board's approval, we would like to start to make some flight plans. Just a one-day trip.
Everybody okay with that?
What's the purpose of the meeting, and what are we hoping to accomplish by meeting with them?
It's to explore the possibilities that are available through Apple for some of our virtual instruction and just general classroom instruction. To hear what some other districts are doing and hear what they're doing with accessibility and some other things.
What are the tools they're offering, and then what are our needs that might help them develop better tools in the future?
So kind of a collaboration, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, everyone okay with that?
Thank you.
Right, move ahead. I also have a travel request. I've been invited to attend the Excel in Ed conference, along with superintendent, and this is a conference. It's education policy conference that I've actually wanted to go to for quite a while. It's a lot of our legislators go, and this is where a lot of
In Hawaii, right?
yeah, whatever. Atlanta. Yeah, I know. The legislators' trips to Hawaii and Singapore and everywhere else. No. So where was I? Oh, it's an education policy conference. It's where a lot of our legislators go and hear best practice legislation from other states, and then also, just a think tank where a lot of the ideas in our legislature are born at this. So I think it'd be really helpful to hear what they're hearing and be able to also talk to them kind of in the moment of when they're hearing these ideas and talk about what's happening in our district. So that's my request.
When is that?
It is also in November,
Good heavens.
the week after Cupertino. And it is a 3-day conference. And it also includes an opportunity to go out and see some different schools in the area and what they're doing.
Specific to school districts then? I mean, is that the clientele that'll be attending?
No.
Legislators?
Most policymakers. Yeah.
There's a group that goes from the State Office of Education and Governor's Office, and just generally it helps you see kind of the trends in education from a more of a parent choice sort of focus.
Hey, is that one okay? Okay, thank you.
Are you going to ask for a trip in November?
Any other board member comments? Superintendent, have any reports?
I will just echo lots of the meetings and events you've gone to that I've been able to participate in as well. And our board is really well represented out there, so I appreciate being part of an organization where we're part of the process inside and outside of the district. And we've had a great launch to the school year. Everybody's working really hard, and great things are happening, so we'll keep talking about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that is the end of our agenda. So at least our open meeting agenda. We still have some closed session items, but thank you to everyone who has joined us tonight and anyone who is still listening. I will take a motion to go into closed session.
I move that we go into closed session for character and competence of individuals, property negotiations, potential litigation, and security.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Dean, second by Ms. Richards. Roll call vote, Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Oh, all in favor of going into closed session, please say yes.
Yes.
I'll roll call vote. Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Ms. George.
Yes.
Ms. Richards.
Yes.
Ms. Dean.
Yes.
Mr. Barnett.
Yes.
Mr. Dunford.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that passes unanimously, and we will not go into closed session. Thank you and have a good night.